Evening, I'd like to call the order of the Planning Commission meeting for Thursday, February 9th. Take roll call, please.
Chairman Hartsfield,
Here.
Vice Chair Brown,
Here.
Commissioner Harvey. Here. Commissioner Kennedy,
Here.
Commissioner Larson,
Here.
and Commissioner Nielsen. Here.
Very good. Please join me in the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Hey. Have the approval of minutes for January 12th, 2023. Must all have the opportunity to review those. Any comments or corrections?
And the minutes in front of you this evening include the addition that Commissioner Brown had requested to attach something to the minutes. And I talked to him briefly after the last meeting, and I just wanted to note that that's actually somewhat problematic in our filing system and not necessary, since that particular document was actually enclosed in the packet that went out to you guys as part of the meeting. So with our record keeping, we retain copies of the packet that goes to you all. There's also the project file that contains that information. So this really is a redundant step. And staff's overwhelming desire would be to strike that particular phrase, the attached here too. But just maybe perhaps reword that so it's noted that it was the draft in the packet to the commission that was reviewed. So that's.
Just again, where are we talking about changing?
The red stuff in the middle of the first page. Where we are actually trying to approve these minutes at our last meeting. I brought them back. I was kind of agreed.
That was the September 22nd.
Yeah, so it's actually that so this reflects the addition. So I guess it's technically a change back to September 22nd too, that I would love to have happen, but if you want to keep it this way, we will.
I trust that the minutes are very explicit on the changes we made to the document that was presented to us, because this is one that could become be looked at.
Yeah.
The circumstance such and maybe looked at again too. So are you comfortable to back that one that was very explicit what the changes were?
Yes, because it's all since been put into that ordinance that's long since sailed.
Okay.
So,
So agreeable to strike the provision. I made a copy which is attached. Which is attached here too. No other corrections. I'd all in favor of approval of minutes. Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you. It takes us to public hearings, and we have 4 on the agenda. Looks like one is being rescheduled to a future date. Before we get into them, the procedures will be the same for all of the public hearings this evening. We'll get presentation from staff as to the issue on the table. It will then address and ask any questions that are concerns at that point. We will then ask the applicants to come forward and give them the opportunity to make comment or provide a presentation. Again, questions from commissioners will be asked at that point for clarifications as may be needed. After that point, we will open to public comment. People in the audience or online wanting to speak will have the opportunity to express themselves at that point. We will then close the public meeting or hearing portion of the meeting and follow up, give the applicant the opportunity to address any issues that may have come up in the public comments. We will then have discussion and hopefully go to a motion and then on to the next. This will be similar process for all 3 items we'll hear tonight. So in public hearings, our first public hearing is SUP 2022-01. Verizon Wireless Temporary Communication Site. Request by Verizon Wireless for approval of the special use permit for a temporary communication facility to provide BZW service to the area. Karen, you have a presentation, staff?
We do. Thank you, Chair. As you said, Chair, well, first of all, good evening. CJ Gates representing the Planning Department here in the city of Woodland Park. As you stated, this application before you tonight is for a temporary communication facility to provide Verizon Wireless service to the Woodland Park area. The facility in question is proposed to be constructed in the parking lot of the Woodland Park City Hall, located at 200 West South Avenue in the center of town. The subject property is zoned public/semi-public land and is bordered by Lake Avenue to the north, Pine Street to the west, Memorial Park to the east, and City Hall to the south. The proposed communication facility will be located in the northeast portion of the parking area on the north side of the Woodland Park City Hall and to the west of the Senior Center, as you can see on the right-hand side of the slide. On August 17th, 2022, the city of Woodland Park issued a temporary use permit to allow Verizon to erect a temporary cell on wheels, also known as a COW, to be set up in the parking lot on the north side of City Hall, as you can see on the slide. The TUP was valid from August 17th, 2022 to August 24th, 2022, and provided additional cell service specifically for the Salute to American Veterans Bike Rally. Once the initial TUP period was complete, the applicant requested and was granted an extension that allowed the COW to continue to operate under the TUP through December 31st, 2022. As you can see on the slide, the left side of the slide is the temporary cell on wheels, the COW site when it was up. And the right-hand side of the slide is the exact location where the COW was and the proposed location of the temporary facility. On the current slide, you can see the proposed site plan, which is also attached within the application. As for reference, this is in this area here, you can see the existing structure, which is the Woodland Park Senior Center. And Lake Avenue. The proposed site identifies that the applicant is proposing the power and telecommunication fiber lines to the site to be installed above ground, so they lay on the ground surface. The red and yellow lines in the center of this slide above outline the route by which the proposed above ground lines will be located. The yellow lines represent proposed fiber and power conduits to be marked in bright reflective color and mounted on shared 8x8x8 16 concrete mason unit blocks every 5 feet that runs from the facility to the existing fiber handle. The red lines represent the proposed 225 overground 2-inch rigid galvanized steel conduit run for power for the proposed facility meter to the proposed cabinet. Staff analyzed municipal code section 18.61.040 in accordance with this application. The proposed site should have direct public benefit to the city. Staff analyzed that this does comply. The proposed facility will benefit the public by providing enhanced Verizon wireless service to the Woodland Park area. The proposed development will not endanger public health and welfare. This may comply. The proposed site plan does include above ground surface fiber lines that runs from the locations east of the senior center to the proposed facility. The proposed facility may comply if the proposed power and telecommunication fiber lines are installed with compliance with an underground installation requirements and cited an appropriate easement. The proposed development will not affect the value of vicinity properties. Staff found that this does comply. The proposed light site is temporary in nature and will not sustainably injure the value of vicinity properties. Additionally, the high-quality wireless service area can add value to the properties. The proposed development will be in harmony with the area which it is to be located. This does comply. The proposed development is compatible with this public/semi-public land zone district where the site is located. The light site will not run on a generator and will instead be hardwired to an electric service. The proposed development and use shall conform to the city's comprehensive plan. The development, this does comply. The development is consistent with the city comprehensive plan. Staff specifically called out the public safety and emergency management goal 1 and resiliency objective 3.1 within the staff report. The proposed development conforms to the provisions, standards, and requirements of all city regulations. This may comply. There are currently 2 significant concerns regarding the installation of the fiber and power lines. The first is the application proposes these lines to be installed on the ground surface. The second concern relates to the location of the proposed easements. The proposed plan includes a 5-foot power and utility easement on the north side of the site. However, this is not compatible with city code. The proposed facility may comply with both of these issues if the utility lines are installed underground per city standards and in an appropriate approved easement. Verizon has responded to this issue, and that respondence is within your staff report packet as well. The proposed development and use shall be designated to accommodate traffic impacts. This does comply. The proposed facility is unmanned and no impacts to traffic is anticipated. Once the light site is installed and operational, only traffic generated will be likely a monthly service to the facility. The proposed development and use shall be constructed and maintained appropriately. The proposed facility will be located in the parking lot of the Woodland Park City Hall and will have no impacts to topography, surface drainage, soil, natural and man-made hazards. Due to the terrain, the base of the site and associated cabinets will not be visible from Lake Avenue. The proposed development and use shall be constructed and maintained with adequate water supply. This does comply. The proposed facility does not require or involve any water supply, wastewater disposal, solid waste disposal, air quality protection methods, nor shall adversely impact existing surface water drainage. The proposed development shall not increase the public danger of fire and other dangers. This does comply. The applicant is taking ownership of all construction and maintenance and claims the facility does not increase public danger. The applicant is also proposing a temporary chain link fence that will secure the site. The proposed development is required to meet all architectural design requirements. This may comply. The applicant has provided architectural design schemes as a part of the site plan review. The applicant is proposing a temporary chain link fence, as I stated before, that will secure the site. As an approval criteria, staff is proposing that the applicant ensure all cabinetry and tower be natural earth tone color. The application was referred to the city departments and external review agency as listed on the slide. Included within your staff report is a staff redline response packet to the application, as well as the applicant responding to our redline comments, which you all saw in your packet. Staff's recommendation is that the Planning Commission recommend to City Council approval of a special use permit for a temporary communication facility to provide VZW service to the area, specifically a 69-foot 6-inch monopole light site on Lake Addition Vacation Alley, 200 West South Avenue, in the public/semi-public lands, subject to the following conditions. An agreement for the use of city property must be finalized and signed by all parties prior to any zoning development permit being issued. 2, an updated site plan resolving all issues identified on the redline plans must be approved by the city before any ZDP will be issued. 3, Applicant must supply City of Woodland Park an up-to-date certificate of liability insurance for the duration of the lease agreement. 4, fiber and electric must be installed below grade in compliance with city specifications. 5, easements must be finalized and located in compliance with city specifications and are subject to city approval. 6, this facility must not be powered by a generator and instead must be hardwired to a permanent power source. 7, the applicant must ensure all cabinetry and equipment located on the site be a natural earth tone color. 8, since this is a temporary facility, the special use permit will expire December 31st, 2025. Should an extension be desired, the applicant must apply for an extension that will be processed per municipal code 18.51.050. That concludes my presentation. Thank you, commissioners. Verizon Wireless also has representation here. Just please let me know if you guys have any questions.
Thank you. Any questions at this point from staff or commissioners?
I have one question of staff. For the special use permit and the zone district, do they both need to comply? We know this is a public use district, or does the special use permit override that district?
The use does need to comply within the district. The reason that it is a special use permit is the height of the tower. So because it is that 60-foot height, that's the reason we're going the special use permit route.
Okay.
I'd actually like to add to that a little bit. Our existing regulations are far less than desirable in terms of addressing telecommunication towers and facilities. So one of the few places where it's clearly spelled out as to what the process is under special use permit when it calls out towers of this size. Otherwise, we're into following the process for uses not otherwise listed. And it still ends up with a public hearing in front of you all in city council. It's just got other kind of messier paperwork to it. So this was a much cleaner, clearer path and fit with what the applicant actually needs in the short run. So that's why you're seeing this particular process. If that makes sense, hopefully.
Anything else for now?
Thank you.
I actually do have a small question. If you don't mind going back to the slide.
Sean, turn your microphone on.
Sorry. So there where it says site, is that where this current site, that's where it is, or was and is going to be now, right?
That's correct.
And so is that parking lot being utilized to, where we're going to have to cut off a lot till 2025 when they decide, or I'm just wondering. If
Right.
it's gonna take up.
Yeah, as far as the exact number of parking spaces, I apologize, I don't have that right. 3 parking spaces, yeah.
I just was trying to make sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Nothing else for now. We invite the applicant to come forward and provide additional information if available.
Thank you. Thanks, CJ, for your presentation.
You'll have to turn that on, Kelly. I apologize.
You give us your name and address.
That's not like it. There we go. Good evening. My name is Kelly Harris and I'm representing Verizon Wireless. My address is 1917 Lowell Boulevard in Denver, Colorado, 80204. Thank you, CJ, for your presentation, and thank you, commissioners, for allowing us to present this evening. As I said, my name is Kelly Harrison. I'm representing Verizon Wireless in their request for a special use permit to place a temporary facility here at City Hall. The light site will measure 60 feet in height, and it will be located in a lease area measuring 18 feet 6 inches by 27 feet, which is slightly smaller than the footprint that the cow was located in previously. We will also have a chain link fence enclosing the facility. The proposed light site is intended to provide service to the area while we are securing a macro facility at the aquatic center, and that is the hearing that was pushed this evening to March 9th. So we will be back in front of you with that request in a few weeks. I did have one comment regarding condition number 4. The fiber and electric must be installed below grade in compliance with city specification. Any ground disturbance that is associated with this temporary facility, which would be the burying of any utility lines, if we do disturb the ground, we do have to run through a full NEPA process, which is running 4 to 6 months right now. It would delay the ultimate deployment of the temporary site. Typically, temporary sites do not involve ground disturbance, and therefore we can get them in quickly. They're deployed right away. They're providing service. There will be a delay in the ultimate site deployment if we do have to break ground and go through the NEPA approval process. At this point, I'd like to answer any questions that you may have regarding the facility.
Well, thank you. Commissioners? Mary?
So you're recommending that we strike condition number 4?
It will speed our ability to deploy the site. Obviously, that is up to the commission if that is struck or if it is not.
When did you first become aware of the city staff's recommendation that the utility should be underground?
Ever since we received the staff report and initial comments to the application, which, we have responded with, we've kept our plans showing the above ground route in the hopes that we can ultimately pursue that, but we will comply with the approval that we receive.
Anything, John?
Was there any discussion of going overhead, and setting a pole to bring the fiber or the power to that spot?
I do not believe so. My architect is available via Zoom. He could potentially weigh in here on any overhead route, but typically that is not standard.
I don't see any other overhead from this aerial shot that I can detect, but I would assume there's some in that area. And that, are you going with a fiber provider that has fiber in the area already?
Yes. Would it be possible to let Matt? Matt, are you?
But
Okay.
that's their nearest point of origin to bring in the fiber.
Hey, can you hear me now?
Yep, now we can.
Yeah, sorry about that. Hopefully not echoing it myself. 1 second. All right, I should be, am I heard now?
Yes, we hear you.
All right, apologize for that. I was kind of double called in here. To respond to a couple of things here that Kelly brought up. If we were to bring overhead, there would still be the process of placing a pole, which would be another ground disturbance.
Okay.
And we need to make sure that complies with core standards, and we're kind of at the mercy of what they're willing to do for us for that to happen. In regards to the fiber, so the old site that was up there was previously being served by a fiber vault along Lake Street there. Our intention will be to be utilizing that same point to tie in the fiber for this site as well.
Okay.
And so I would just like to ask you, this is a temporary site, so you get the other site up, which is why you're wanting to do the above ground, correct?
That is correct. Essentially, we would like to have Bridge provide some service and coverage to the area while we are ultimately pursuing all the due diligence required to put the macro permanent site in. And so that would be a NEPA, environmental, all the things associated with leasing and design, as well as ground disturbance requirements.
Because that's your permanent site.
That would be the permanent site.
Okay. And do you know about how long that might take you? Or is there a guesstimation as to when that permanent site will be up and running?
So we're currently working on the lease with the city. The lease has been essentially approved, and we're moving through the zoning process, and then we'll get a building permit.
Okay.
Start to finish a brand new macro facility that typically takes about 18 months to full approval. We hope to have it constructed at some point in early 2024.
So before your 25 cutoff date is up and.
Yes, our original request was 12/31/24 as a cutoff date. We're happy to have a little extra wiggle room But, you know, we hope to be up and running and have the temp facility out of here before the end of 2020.
Is anybody monitoring it to make sure nobody's going in there disturbing, doing? Just for my own curiosity, I'm just wondering.
The site is monitored 24/7.
Okay.
And then obviously we will have a more secure fence up with the light site rather than the kind of construction fencing that you saw before with the cow.
Okay, yeah, so that's what I was like, oh. That's a lot of
We
expensive
didn't quite
equipment.
anticipate, when we put it up, it was for the POWMIA ride, and then we ended up, you know, extending it a bit longer than we anticipated originally.
How will the tower be supported? I see the temporary one, not nearly as tall, had guy wires out.
Yes.
What's the structure
So,
look like for the larger one?
the light site has a ballasted sled on the ground. It's a 15 by 15 pad with a frame at the bottom with concrete blocks. And so the concrete blocks and the frame provide the structural support, and the guy wires are not needed then for that type of
Okay.
install.
And did you have fiber to this temporary
We did,
site and it just was on the ground as well?
correct.
Okay.
You're saying that the other site for the permanent location, is that the one that's being rescheduled?
Yes.
Okay,
Mhm.
so you are diligently working towards that.
Yes, we are.
Okay.
Yes.
What was the protection for the fiber and the electric for the previous cow?
I believe, and Matt, you can weigh in, I believe we had was it the plastic covers?
Yes, yeah, so the previous temporary site there, it didn't have any power going to it at all. It was fed exclusively by the generator. So all it had was fiber from that existing handhole along lake there, and it was just in PVC conduit laying on grade.
What would the length of the run for electric and fiber be? If it's above ground?
It was in that presentation, 250 feet, I think, or 200 and something feet.
So would all of that above ground support be within the fenced area?
No, the fenced area will just be the lease area, the roughly 18 by 27. And then the utility run would extend. You can see it extending, basically the red and the yellow lines would be outside of the fenced area.
Would it then be susceptible or vulnerable to vehicle traffic if it's above ground, even if it's covered with PVC covered?
It's running through an area, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong here, but the grassed area where there wouldn't be any traffic.
Behind the senior center on the grassy hill,
Oh, on the
Nope,
grassy knoll.
no
Okay.
driveways or
All
anything.
right,
It was 225 feet in the
okay,
document for the red line, which represents the
okay.
ground path.
Yeah,
So it
it's-
just comes down the hill from Lake, across the back of the building and past those two sheds, the parking lot. To the
Let's let
side.
CJ do a little tour with the mouse here real quick on the site plan.
Yeah, so as you guys can see here, I'm circling the existing senior center. So this is an existing building. This is Lake Avenue up at top of the slide. This top yellow line right here is the existing overground PVC conduit with fiber. So that is proposed to be removed and replaced with the new temporary light site.
Is that the red?
No, so that the PVC conduit that was here, that was the top yellow line. As you can see right here.
And that's since been removed. And so the yellow and red line that go in tandem across the center of the site are where the new lines would be associated with the light site. And then to the left, if you can hover over where the tower would actually be situated.
And also, as you can see here, right next to the senior center, there's two existing sheds and the facility will be right next to the existing sheds. Taking up, as previously mentioned, about 3 parking spaces.
So if those utility lines are underground, would it still follow the same
So if
line as you
there
shown
would
on
be
the diagram?
a slightly different route, it would run north from the lease area just to the south side of Lake and then over. So it'd be a slightly different route.
Along the edge of the right of way basically is where it would run.
Mhm.
Like most of our easements for subdivisions and such, you know, they run on the outside of lots and not through the middle of something, which is.
Which is a good
compliance-
idea,
Which
yeah.
is in compliance with the city standard.
Yeah. Because it is a temporary site, the process for approval to disrupt the ground, is it still gonna take 3 to 4 months?
4 to 6 months.
Four to six.
Any
okay.
disturbance of the ground will trigger that NEPA, and it doesn't make a difference during the review process if you're proposing a temporary site or a permanent site. They treat it
It's
as if
still
it's
the
a
same.
permanent site as soon as you disturb the ground.
So if we approve the plan tonight and it goes to city council, when does the clock start? For whatever procedures are necessary to disturb the ground?
So once we have final approval on the plans, that would then allow us to kick off the NEPA process, and that's when that 4 to 6 month clock would start. So we were still discussing the exact time frame after assuming city council grants approval, then the time frame between that final approval and the final zoning, the PZD approval. But at some point shortly after city council approval, we could get the NEPA rolling.
This item is, assuming you make a decision this evening, it is currently scheduled for public hearing with city council on March 16th.
And you said how many months?
4 to 6. So our hope, because we have, it's quite busy here in the summer. The hope is to deploy the light site ahead of the busy season. This could push that well into late summer. But
Karen, since this condition was put in by staff, and is there any willingness on the part of the building department and the staff that they would grant a variance to let it not go underground? I assume that's a requirement. It'd be
The undergrounding of utilities associated with development is specified in the city code. So, and the fact that this, while it's temporary, it's more than just a few months that it's situated out there. It's potentially a couple of years. And, you know, there is concern about having, especially the electric cable, you know, laying on the surface of the ground. Yeah, there's just concerns about that. There's a reason those are highly protected, and people are just interested in what fences they choose to jump or violate, or,
Yeah.
you know, it's just got some potential for not being as safe as it could be. So, no, from a staff perspective.
Well, you won't have anybody digging it up or cutting a trench and cutting it in two if it's sitting laying there on the top of the ground.
Yeah, I could just cut it.
Nevertheless, so the question I would have is, if it's code and it's required, whether we leave that in there or not, somebody from the building department have to grant a variance, correct? It's not going to go on top of the ground just if we approve a special use permit. It's going to go on top of the ground if the building department grants a variance to this requirement. Right? We don't grant that. That comes from the building department.
Good point. We don't grant variances.
We don't grant variances to code.
Code.
We're not trying to say code or not. Our decision here tonight is, do they get a special use permit to put this in? These conditions are fine. You're just asking here that you want them to do it for code on that when they've already asked it for that. I don't know that that needs to come to us as much as it is, you know, if we granted the special use permit to put the temporary facility in, they're going to go to the building department with their plans. It's going to have to be approved. Right? And you're going to make a decision based on whether you give them a variance or not at the building department.
It's technically within the engineering specifications, if I remember correctly.
That's correct.
And I am not 100% familiar with what appeal or variance process may be associated with that. I know there's been instances, and you'll see that later tonight in a different application, where the road right of way width was varied, but that was done through a preliminary plat and final plat, or a preliminary plat approval that went through both planning commission and city council, ultimately blessed off on that. So there is a, I think, possible potential that city council could maybe make that decision. But I said, it's from a safety perspective, it just, staff has a hard time with this particular ask.
What is our
This-
situation with the public use of wireless communications in the city offices as far as fire department, police department, that kind of thing currently? I remember, seem to recall there was some issue back a year ago or something where we were having struggles because of the network. And I know there's still more demand for network capacity here in Woodland Park. Is there anything going on with that? That's a safety issue that might outweigh the safety issue? If we could secure an above ground and had this 4 months earlier, does that provide any safety value for the citizens of Woodland Park? Do you know?
I do not know.
Okay,
Ken, with the point you raised, I think is a good one. If instead of saying fiber and electric must be installed below grade, if we had simply said fiber and electric must be installed in accordance with city code. And even if we didn't say that, it still.
It has to be to city code.
It must be installed according to city code, whether we say so or not, unless there's some provision for some kind of a waiver or some kind of a temporary relief into it. So, I'm not an expert
Yeah, actually,
enough to know whether it's such a
the
bad.
comment I'm looking at for number 4 in the attachment or the packet that was sent out to us says the applicant must secure necessary easements to finalize the location of and ensure all power and telecommunication lines are run underground. That's a little different than that.
Here's the revised.
Yeah, that's the revised. Thank you. But anyway, so
The issue is below grade. I'm saying if we simply said installation must be in compliance with city code, technically we said the same thing.
yeah,
I mean,
Yeah.
our issue isn't because of some planning zoning kind of concern that needs to be underground. It's because if the city code requires it, it's required and unless it doesn't seem necessary and there's some process for waiving it.
I'm just
then
trying to-
They should avail themselves of that process.
my second part of my questioning of her was to find out if there's any, consideration that the time is of the essence here to get this temporary facility in for some other safety concerns or purposes for the city of Woodland Park that would weigh against putting them above ground or below ground. It takes an additional 4 to 6 months potentially, which hopefully it's not that long for this minor of a disturbance, but if it is, then that should be addressed from a timeliness standpoint in the future. But is there anything that you know of that's a compelling reason to get this temporary site in quickly before the busy season of activity in Woodland Park? I know some Verizon service has been troublesome from a network demand standpoint in Woodland Park last year.
Yes, I mean, Woodland Park, especially entering into last summer, was one of our highest customer complaint locations. There's a number of news articles from last summer, from June and July, July and August is what I pulled today, but complaining that many of the city departments do utilize Verizon service, Verizon phones, and that residents were having issues making calls and potentially connecting to 911. Now, these were news articles, where these concerns were.
I seem to recall that. That's why I brought it up.
Well, in our package, we do have a letter from the emergency manager for the county and from the sheriff's department that this would enhance their emergency communications capacity. But I don't know that as a planning commission, we can waive the requirement that's already in our code. That's another entity that would do that. But in the meantime, I mean, we're taking this as a single aspect of installing this temporary, which is not actually temporary if it's up to 2 years. What about the rest of the construction of the site? How long will it take? Can it be done concurrently? So it ends up that by the time you get the approval for the disturbance of the ground, it's going to coincide with the final build out of this temporary site.
So the actual build out of the temporary site, is quite quick. So we would not need a 4 to 6 month lead time. You essentially, roll it in. These are designed to be a quick setup. In many cases, they're brought in, if there's a fire or some sort of emergency. So it's a quick setup. Typically, we wait until we have all of our approvals, including the NEPA, and then we would deploy the site at that time.
And what is a NEPA? What is the?
That's the requirement if we're gonna disturb the ground, we have.
National Environmental Policy Act.
Oh, that one. Okay. The NEPA. Okay.
So just as another discussion topic. We've run a site there before on generator for a temporary period of time. I know that's expensive. Fiber is not a safety issue being above the ground. It was temporarily authorized before. So if push came to shove, we could put fiber in, run it on temporary power until the approval to disturb the ground and put the permanent power underground would come potentially. Or we could temporarily authorize surface power that doesn't go in the same route as the underground until the underground were put in, and wouldn't have to be there as long. So there's lots of options here that could be worked out, I would think.
Well, one of the things I wanted to ask you or Matt is there, are we married to this spot or can you move it closer so there's not so much above ground?
So the sheds, I mean, we are almost as close as we can be to the utilities. I mean,
I mean, you don't have to answer that. I just was like, are we married to this or can we move it in closer so
There's
you don't have so much above ground?
because it is a temporary facility, because we, bring it in. There is more flexibility in location, but, being in the parking lot is for ease of access and whatnot is the preference.
Okay.
But once the study is concluded, how long would it take then to bury the electric and fiber?
Matt, what would you predict for construction timelines on burying those utilities?
So it really would come down to a coordination and permitting issue. I guess we have to see if another permit would be required to actually go in underground. But the actual construction time is pretty minimal. We're talking a couple weeks. Once that would clear, if we'd have to go get any additional permitting, and we can schedule the cutover lines with Core appropriately.
It's an expense and you have to undo it when you're done because it's temporary. So it's not desirable for somebody to want to spend the money to do it, but it'll get it done if you just go ahead and bury it. And you could provide a temporary power option
Until it was
until it
buried.
was buried.
But
It might be that the temporary runs into the point where they've got the other one done and they actually never wind up getting it buried, depending on how you set that temporary up. How fast you are getting the major site done, but
Is there anything else that they can put on top of it that makes it more secure?
you could just fence the whole thing.
Yeah,
It's a little extra fencing, which is maybe more costly than burying it. So
Yeah,
they'd have to
just
decide
trying
what
to
the
spitball, yeah,
cost benefit
yeah.
is on either one.
Well, the burying will cause the NEPA study to be done. And that's a time consumer, and that seems to be the concern of the applicant.
Yeah,
and I appreciate that, but we're still talking about a site that could be in existence up through the end of 2025, and that's not temporary.
Excuse me. I would also like to draw your attention to one of the comments that came out of the whole review process. And Kelly's very aware of this, that back on December 12th, there was a virtual meeting between Verizon and Core in the city. And it was the city who proposed a solution for Core to run the permanent power to this site. That would then potentially be used in the future as a charging station, a motor vehicle charging station. So in the interim, these folks would have the benefit of that conduit. And I know that they've actually been working and talking with Core about that possibility, but I got the impression from Kelly recently that it was somewhat of a timing issue. So I will say they are exploring other options. But I apologize that I'm not able to tell you like what the variance or waiver process is. Staff definitely has some concerns about having an electric line basically on the surface of the ground. So that's why you see the recommendation that you do from city staff. And rather than mandate, you must work something out with this particular company. We left it more broad in that revised condition that you have in front of you this evening. So that's really the essence of that change from what was in the staff report to what we laid out tonight in terms of conditions of approval.
Item 6 says not be powered by generator. Can we discuss why that's not allowed or not recommended?
It's definitely a noise impact on the residential neighbors to the north.
Has that been an issue in the past installation?
We did hear pretty consistent complaints about the noise from the generator associated with powering the cow.
And that was very temporary. Not very long. So this could be months, depending on how that NEPA study goes, so.
And with the temporary use permit, when we extended it after the veterans rally, we actually did request that it be put on permanent power and timing and potentially some of the other issues Kelly's talked about here this evening. That never happened. So it ran on a generator for all those from what, 4 or 5 months there. So I'm sure the neighbors would not be happy to hear about that again.
Are there any sound mitigation measures we could implement? Concrete block walls around it, or you stack those highway concrete blocks to a certain height, it would deflect the noise upward.
There are potential noise mitigation options for generators. It usually increases the size. We would be most likely looking at an increase in the footprint. That is something I could look into. And perhaps Matt can comment. We did propose a generator with noise mitigation in the city of Littleton at one point, but I do know there is still noise associated with the generator.
Yeah, so these kind of rollaway generators typically don't have sound attenuation built into them. So we would be looking at some kind of external factor to be able to achieve that. The other side of that is from the Verizon network assurance aspect of it. If this thing's going to be up a little bit longer, people are going to be relying on it for service. If it's solely relied on, ability to get diesel up there and maintain that generator, which could fail, it adds some risk to the performance of the network should it go down.
Sounds like the preference is from all parties to have a permanently powered
Yes,
facility.
we were actively pursuing that with the cow, and we still are, but obviously there are some difficulties.
If you were to provide electrical power ground, how would that be protected? Is it conduit? Is it it's not a big extension cord.
Right, exactly. Matt, can you address the protection of the power run, please?
Yeah, so we'd be routing it in RGS conduit, rigid galvanized steel conduit on concrete blocks on ground, and also painting it to make it visible. So we're taking actions to protect that power at a much greater level than that previous fiber was brought over just conduit on grade. We're securing it, we're making it visible, and we're putting in the heaviest duty conduit that we can.
But again, that doesn't comply with current codes, it sounds like.
No.
But you're gonna paint it so it was visible, so that kind of brings up the whole visibility aspect. Pictures we've seen are from the original temporary installation, and I've seen it firsthand and wasn't pleased with what I was looking at. So what does this new facility look like?
Do you have
That included?
It's in their plan set. CJ will pull that up.
It's a lot of
I
pages.
believe it's
back.
all just black and white, but it's reasonably handy. So bear with us for a moment.
And you're putting up a construction type fence. Is it possible that would be have slats, vinyl or wood slats to?
it is a chain link fence, and we do have the option of adding slats.
So as you see here on your screen, this is a sheet from their initial application in accordance with their site plan.
So you have the light site facility, and you can see at the base, there is the pad that is mounted within, and the cabinets, and then the generator is also located within the fence facility
So there is a generator proposed?
for emergency outages.
Backup generator.
Okay. All right. Any other questions at this point, your applicant?
Who would apply for the necessary paperwork for the study for disturbance of the, would that be Core or Verizon?
Verizon will, our regulatory team will apply for the NEPA. Submit for the NEPA.
And Core doesn't have any more pool than Verizon.
Core does not have, Core has its own set of obstacles in
Okay.
securing easements, and I spoke with Core yesterday. They indicated that their easement process is quite lengthy. It might actually take longer than what Verizon would need to do to
Okay.
secure an easement. And
I will not bring it back up again.
we're trying very hard, but there are just a few timeline obstacles.
I assume that, hello,
Oh, sorry.
yes, I assume that the service being provided by Verizon is adequate for the community at this time. Because it's winter, we don't have the tourists coming through town using their mobiles.
We are, the service in Woodland Park needs to be enhanced. There needs to be a service upgrade. There needs to be an additional permanent site here, but we do not have the level of complaints that we receive. So
Because of the customers are not here.
yes, the population is
Yeah.
less right now than it will be in the height of summer.
Okay.
No further questions. Thank you for your comments. We'll probably give you an opportunity to come back up. Go to open our public comment. David, do we have anybody signed up? Do we have anybody else that was signed up for this issue?
Online?
Okay, well, let them finish the paperwork, then invite them to come up to the front. So name and address, please.
My name is Pete Hitchcock, 4265 Trout Creek Road, Woodland Park, Colorado, 80863. We do own the 4 platted lots directly to the north of these, lots 5 through 8, block 13, Lake Edition. I am a real estate broker and also an investor. I do acknowledge that Verizon had issues last summer. I experienced that firsthand. When we received the notice that they were going to be putting in a tower, a temporary tower, my wife and I went to the city to discuss what the city's position is. The first question that I asked is, what is the definition of temporary? The response I received from Mr. Gates was laughter. That suggested to us that this is an open-ended relationship between Verizon and the city of Woodland Park. That was not the response I would expect from a city employee. It certainly set the tone for the rest of our conversation. I requested a staff report to better understand the city's position and was told that it wasn't available because there was something or some redlining that was being done. It was being sent back to Verizon. The January meeting being postponed to February. Never did I receive a staff report, but I did find one online yesterday. The one aspect that I liked that the city did ask Verizon for a proposed end date. As addressed earlier by Karen, the municipal code is definitely lacking and behind other cities. There should be rules established for cell towers, specifically setbacks to residential neighborhoods. The proposed temporary cell tower may be on public, semi-public land, but it abuts urban residential zoning. As it sits, the cell tower is nearly on the north property line with a 50-foot right-of-way, separating it from the residential property that has a 25-foot setback for building, meaning this cell tower could be roughly 80 feet away from the residential property. Definitions of a cell tower. Where is it in the municipal code? Only towers over 50 foot tall are addressed as needing a special permit in a public, semi-public zoning. I requested information regarding what zones towers shorter than 50 feet are allowed in and wasn't given an answer other than I'll get back to you on that. The municipal code is lacking regulations for towers, specifically cell towers. In the event that the city wants to take this upon them, they should set setbacks, height restrictions, et cetera, from residential properties. Special use permit 18.61.040 standards. C, substantial injury to the value of vicinity properties. The loss of an unobstructed Pikes Peak view is a substantial injury. The cell tower with its expanded top will significantly alter the view from both our land and the homes to the east and to the west. Pikes Peak unobstructed views significantly increase the value of residential land or homes in Woodland Park. The reduced views, even if short term, although according to Carol, short term, 2 years does not qualify as short term. Even if it is short term, it will never negatively impact the ability to sell and will also affect the land value for the duration that the views are obstructed. As a real estate investor, this specifically injures my potential for livelihood. In review, I understand the need for cell communications, but do feel that the city has left itself in a vulnerable position by not having established municipal codes for this exact situation. This should be a wake-up call. It sets precedent for future requests by other communication companies. The municipal code needs to be updated to address cell towers. There are allowed zoning districts, heights, setbacks from residential zoning, and placements as to not interfere or obstruct resident views. I request you deny this application for special use permit as it does not comply with the requirements for standard special use permits 16.31.040, specifically item C, substantial injury to vicinity properties. If you choose to overlook substantial injury, at the very least, I request you table this request until substantial injury can be addressed and minimized, specifically the location to minimize the loss of views in the time period of which vicinity properties will be substantially injured. I understand that there's an aquatic center location for a permanent location. The special use permit for a tower, if issued, should set a specific time period from the completion of that permanent tower for the removal of a temporary tower. Verizon has suggested, I thought I read somewhere earlier that they said 12 months, I heard 18 months tonight. But regardless, right now, they put 12/31/24. That's approximately 23 months from now. The city is suggesting 12/31/25. I'm suggesting that there's a hard stop date, regardless if Verizon completes their permit process or not. But ultimately, I believe that there should be consideration taken into the loss of views, the fact that there's power nowhere near this. There's got to be a better spot in the city that's not going to create those hardships.
Appreciate your comments.
One question.
Yes, please.
Could you comment on impacts that the diesel generators may have had during the temporary operation last year?
Mine's vacant land, so I don't live there, but we have intentions of developing that land. I have friends that live on West Street that complained about it. That's a block and a half away. You know, people visiting the park have concerns about the noise.
Good, thank you. Is there any other persons wanting to speak? Anybody online, David?
There are no hands raised.
Well, last opportunity for online comment on this issue. Anyone else in the audience? We'll close the public comment and invite the applicant to come up and give a rebuttal if they care to. Okay, thanks. Well, any questions for staff? The applicant?
I have a question, but not for staff. Did you guys look at maybe any possible other locations? Or maybe on the site you plan on doing the permanent one on?
We looked at the Ute Cultural Center as one other option that was offered by the city. Ultimately, to be most central to the summer activities, this was a great location for that. The aquatic center parking lot is very, very full. There's really no good location on that parcel to roll out a temporary site and take up any parking.
Okay, thank you. I just was curious.
Sure.
Excuse me. I had one point that I wanted to clarify relative to something that Kelly had mentioned about the lease being essentially approved. That's at a staff level where we've been vetting that, but it has not gone to city council for their approval. They're the ones that would approve the lease agreement for the use of the land. So we're focused on the entitlement of the use for this duration, and then any type of agreement to actually utilize the land.
And I had a question about the lease. Well, first off, how much would Verizon be paying for the temporary site?
I would have to look that up. I don't have that at my fingertips.
And I saw some type of calculation in the staff package, but I had a hard time following it. And the lease agreement and any discussion on that would be done in executive session, correct? Since it has to do with real estate.
Potentially.
Yeah, just out of curiosity. But the site that was just mentioned by the applicant at Ute Cultural Center, why was that not appropriate?
That was actually Verizon's preference to focus on this particular site as opposed to the one behind Ute Pass Cultural Center.
Okay. And the site, the permanent site, not appropriate at this time because of parking consideration.
I wasn't part of any of those conversations, but based on what Ms. Harrison just said, it sounds like there's just not the availability to get something in there on a temporary basis and construct the permanent
And have room to construct the permanent site. Okay,
Correct.
Thank you.
Oh, comments, discussion? Questions?
Seems like the issues are delay from burying underground and perhaps something about generators. It sounds like we don't want to say will not be powered by generator, but I think you might say will not be powered by generator except for emergency or backup use. So we're not trying to prohibit a backup generator. I indicated before where I thought would be based on Ken's insight. If number 4 were just reworded to say the facility and associated utilities must comply with city specifications. It seems like that addresses everything the planning commission could do. I don't have any special expertise on when it has to be buried or not, or how to rate safety questions or other ones too. It's whatever we say, it's got to comply with city specs, unless the city specs are varied or soft in some manner. So why are we the ones jumping in to say how you put in the electric lines? Because we don't know. And whatever we thought doesn't matter anyways.
Well, Lee, I think the answer to that question is the application is proposing that this line be placed on ground, not below ground. And then that.
Well, and that's what I was saying, if the provision just said the facility and associated utilities must comply with city specifications, then that fully addresses the topic.
It does. But I mean, you were asking, why are we asked to address that issue? Well, it's part of the application, that's all.
But Lee, you're saying get rid of the phrase that says must be installed below grade, and it should simply say fiber and electric must be in compliance with city specifications.
Or I would say the facility and associated utilities must comply with city specifications, which is sort of obvious, and I'm not sure how we could ever say.
Did you get that, CJ?
No, please, again. One more time, please.
Suggesting an alternate wording for item 4.
Right. And that wording is,
Number 4 would say the facility and all utilities must be installed in compliance with city specifications.
And also in 6, they said the facility must not be powered by a generator except for emergency or backup use. You probably want to, if you're going to put it in, you might as well have it used when power's out.
Correct.
And is there a difference in saying must versus shall?
Those are typically interchangeable.
Okay.
I'd like to address the issue of the appearance. And I'd like some kind of screening in the fence. So I would propose that they put slats within the chain link fence to obscure the equipment, whether they be plastic or wood. I guess I'm go both ways.
So the development over by the golf course, that power station or whatever, they have slats in the fence.
Mhm.
And I think the yard that was going to store equipment and stuff, there was some screening requirement that was per code, but we talked about it because that was a planned unit development or some other thing, or I don't know, but
Yeah.
so isn't there something already in the code that requires industrial things like that to be screened with the fencing?
Adjacent to residential uses, I believe.
Across the street is Jason.
Seems like it's more common in the fences I've seen go up recently that they're all slatted.
Well, I don't think it's a major change.
No,
but
it's
I
not.
think it would be a benefit. Or enhance the installation. And
I assume they're proposing chain link temporary, right? So just a screened chain link would be fine.
I'd like to add,
That's really going to be the issue, is what's the building department's willing to accept from a temporary installation versus a permanent.
temporary, I think, is defined in the building code is what, 180 days?
Well, and building code doesn't typically govern the installation of fences, if I recall. Except if they exceed certain heights perhaps.
But we're talking about the entire facility and the antenna installation, and this is part of that installation.
Yeah, so it's actually under zoning.
But there was a temporary installation of the cow in support of the bike rally that had to be extended. What was that initial period of time that was termed temporary? Was that 180 days?
No, it was like that weekend of the event.
That was from August 17th, 22 to August 24th. That was the initial time period.
Week.
Yeah, a week.
Okay, and then it was extended for how long after that?
It was extended to December 31st, 22.
So to the end of the year, the end of the calendar year.
Okay.
As- And that's consistent with how temporary use permits typically run. They're within that calendar year.
Mhm.
So
In the last comment, number 8. Special use permit expire date and extensions. Would have to be applied for. Per the municipal code. What are our options? Who would approve an extension? Would it come back to the planning commission?
the code section referenced is basically the same process because they're, and this is where staff just applied the code to our best of our ability, that there is not a provision that talks about specifically extending or renewing a special use permit. So if it were to expire and somebody wanted to reapply, they'd go through the same process. So it's essentially just go through the same process if it goes through planning commission and city council
Just-
to extend it.
I'm cognizant of the comments from our citizen here on the issues of the visibility being impaired from properties, and that will impact the value. And so I'm more inclined to be considerate of if Verizon is interested in December 31st of 2024, that would be our potential expiration date as opposed to the 2025. Rather than just extending it 12 months automatically now without, I don't know, was your request specifically for 2024 through the year, into the year?
Correct. We were asked during the application process to give our best guess as to when
Right.
on or before date that would be removed.
And so that would bring it up to a more timely review for the time for that to come down. If we were to go forward with it, to take some of the onus off of it just sitting there and being used for extra capacity. Because it doesn't have to come down. I would rather, if they're done, and it has to come back and get reapproved sooner rather than later.
Especially in light of what Karen just mentioned, is that temporary permits are generally within a calendar year.
Yeah. I mean, that's still quite a while, but and I don't know if there's an alternate review process where we would be notified of progress and or possibility of taking that site down. Or I presume that your new site, when it's the permanent one, would have enough capacity that you wouldn't, not knowing how things are going to go or grow, but that you would be anxious to get out of this other site then as quickly as possible.
Yes, cows, light sites are expensive to deploy, and yes, once we have our other site up and running, we would pull that site.
Okay, make sure the rent's high enough so they're anxious to get it down.
Yeah, I just found it.
CJ. Can you check that reference 18.51.050? Yeah, I think you may have meant something else.
That looks like, I'm just looking at our city website here, 18.51050. Yeah, that's under Board
That's
of
a Board of
Adjustments.
Oops.
I apologize, commissioners, that is a typo, so we'll nail that down.
All I had.
So Ken, are you suggesting that the December 31st, 2025 date be changed?
I think was adequate for Verizon. I think I'm seeing confirmation from them. And so I understand the suggestion of staff to extend that, but I would prefer not to.
Agree.
I think that change right there helps with the value issue as well.
I still don't like
It's
the
not
idea.
completely, but it's temporary, but it's only gonna be a year shorter than most.
Yeah,
Understanding that if in fact there is a requirement to bury the utilities, it's gonna be less time for that temporary site to be up, but you know, it is what it is.
yeah, we'll get that done if it can be done. Again, I think that lies with the building department on what they're willing to allow. And whether Verizon can pursue temporary power and operate under temporary power while they're still getting their permanent power installed. I know that that happens in construction, but they don't necessarily let you operate on temporary power. So you'd have to see if there's some variance with the building department that might allow that.
That's city staff.
But that wouldn't be us. I wouldn't say.
Screening as approved by city
And for the records, Commissioner, the section of code we were speaking of on number 8 here. Under the staff recommendation is section or chapter 18.61, which is special use permits. So we will get that changed under condition number 8.
The 050 is correct on that number.
6-1.
Yeah.
This would be looking for a motion. You've been working on one.
I'll make a try if something works for you, like allowing the city staff to agree on screening too, and not try and write right here what screening we mean. All right, well, somebody can amend this then. I move that we adopt the recommendation of the city staff with the following changes. Number 4, be revised to read: the facility and all utilities must comply with city specifications. Number 6, be revised to read: the facility must not be powered by a generator except for emergency or backup use. Number 8, be modified to read: since this is to be a temporary facility, the special use permit shall expire December 31st, 2024. Should an extension be desired, the applicant must apply for an extension that will be processed for 18.61.050. And add a number 9, fencing satisfactory to the city shall screen the installation.
I second.
Very good. Any comments? Take a vote, please.
Vice Chair Brown,
Yes.
Commissioner Harvey,
Yes.
Commissioner Kennedy,
Yes.
Commissioner Larson,
Yes,
Commissioner Nielsen,
Yes.
and Chairman Hartsfield.
Yes. Thank you. That concludes SUP 2022-01. Next item on the agenda was SUP 2022-02, Ryan Wireless Macro Facility. And that has been rescheduled to March 9th, 2023. Next item on the agenda is PUD/SPR 2023-01, Champion Express Car Wash PUD Amendment and SPR request by 7B Building and Development, represented by Baseline Engineering on behalf of Department of Property Management, to consider a PUD amendment to change the use from eating/drinking place, eat in and drive-through, to instead allow a car wash on lot 4 of the Walmart Center and amended building and parking data.
I have something I want to clarify before CJ starts with the staff report. And you all may recall that the city has been using Baseline Engineering as a consultant to assist with some reviews and such here in the planning department. And that is actually the engineering firm that was commissioned by this company to present all of their application material, or pull their application materials together. And actually in their application, they flagged that and said, don't let anybody from Baseline review our application because they were actually the applicant. So to make sure that there was not that conflict of interest, both staff and the applicant was very cognizant of that. So what you see this evening from the applicant was only reviewed in-house. And so we took care of any potential conflicts.
Thank you, Karen.
You're welcome.
Clarifying that. CJ, I guess sounds like you have the presentation on this as well.
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. As stated, this is a PUD amendment to the Walmart Plan Unit Development for Champion Express Car Wash. Lot 4 of the Walmart PUD is located on the southern end of Woodland Park, west of Highway 24, and within the northern portion of the Walmart PUD. The subject property is zoned Plan Unit Development and is zoned as seen on the left-hand side of the slide. On the right-hand side of the slide, you will see the extent of the Walmart PUD, and outlined in red on the northern portion is lot 4. In 2005, Woodland Park City Council approved a request to rezone the property from agriculture to Plan Unit Development. In 2007, City Council approved the final plat, which consisted of 6 lots and 4 tracks. The Walmart store has been built on lot 1, while lots 2 through 6 were to be developed in the future for commercial uses. Within the narrative of the plan unit, or the final development of the PUD, it states lots 2 through 4 are for general commercial use and have been depicted on the final development plan as financial institution with 3 drive-through windows, eating/drinking place for eat-in service, and eating/drinking place for drive-in and through service. These lots could be interchanged as any of these uses for compatible uses allowed by the Woodland Park Code. The maximum building height for lot 2 through 4 is 35 feet. As you see on this slide, this table comes from the final development plan narrative. Outlined in red is lot 4 and the dimensional standards it has to meet per the PUD requirements that are approved. From this table, the applicant is proposing to change the building use for lot 4 as well as change the parking requirements in accordance with this proposed use. I would like to also point out within the applicant's application, the building height language was omitted. So the building height is not proposed to be changed. So the building height as approved right now is 35 feet and will stay 35 feet as a maximum building height. On the current slide, you can see the proposed site plan, which is also attached within your staff report. The applicant is proposing an express style car wash that includes a 3,539 square foot building that is 20.4 feet in height. The applicant is also proposing an entrance and exit from the site to the west of the property on private access drive labeled on the site plan here. No new public streets are proposed, and the location of the access to the proposed site is consistent with the approved PUD plan. In addition to this requested PUD amendment, as seen on the application, the applicant has also applied for a site plan review of the proposed car wash. The site plan review is a zoning development permit and is reviewed and approved administratively through the City of Woodland Park Planning Department. The Planning Commission is seeing this item tonight due to the PUD amendment portion. Staff has reviewed chapter 18.30 in accordance with the PUD amendment. The purpose of the PUD district is to provide more flexibility and latitude of design to provide a greater variety of uses. Staff states this does comply. The proposed PUD amendment would provide greater flexibility in the development of the parcel by allowing for a car wash rather than an eat-in or drive-through service. To best accomplish these objectives and in order to develop an acceptable plan that is in keeping with other chapters of this title, it is essential that the proponents coordinate with the development of the Planning Commission. This application is being brought to you tonight, so yes, it is being coordinated with the Planning Commission. All uses allowed in a PUD district are permitted conditionally and meet city code. This may comply. The uses allowed within this PUD were established at the time the PUD was approved. This is a request to change the use from lot 4 from a eating and drinking place to a car wash. While the applicant has proposed updated narrative language of the PUD, the table 1, as seen on a previous slide, will still need to be updated to reflect this change. Development must meet all development standards. This may comply. On lot 4 is subject to the request. Page 1 of the approved PUD development plan includes a table, which again, previously seen. The dimensional standards for this proposed use meets every requirement except for the parking standards, which the applicant is proposing to meet city's established parking requirements in the municipal code section 18.39.20. The proposed car wash will include 23 stacking spaces, 10 vacuum stalls, and 3 employee stalls. Parking, off-street parking requirements for residential uses. This is not applicable. No residential use is being proposed on the site. Off-street requirements for non-residential uses. This does comply. The applicant is proposing to meet the city's established parking requirements in municipal code section 18.39.20. The proposed car wash will include, as stated before, 23 stacking spaces, 10 vacuum stalls, and 3 employee stalls. Landscaping shall meet city code. This may comply. The applicant included a detailed landscaping plan with the application. Staff included a red line comment within this landscape plan, which is also included within your staff report. This provision may comply if the applicant is consistent with the Woodland Park Municipal Code and the current approved PUD plan. And I also want to note that a detailed compliance check will occur with administrative review of the proposed site plan before any zoning development permits are issued. The application was referred to the city and outside referral agencies as listed on the slide here. Staff did also include a staff red line comment to the applicant's application, in which were within your staff report. Staff's recommendation for this item is to move to recommend approval of the Walmart PUD amendment to change the use from eating/drinking place, eat-in and drive-through, to instead allow a car wash on lot 4 of the Walmart Center and amend building and parking data subject to the following conditions. Number 1, an amended page 1 of the PUD plan of this development must be submitted with an updated building and parking data table to reflect the change in use and parking for lot 4. In association with the administrative site plan review, The applicant must provide updated drawings that respond and comply with all comments set forth within the city staff redline application comment packet. Number 3, the private access drive labeled on the site plan must be updated for consistency with the recorded subdivision plat. This concludes my presentation. Thank you, commissioners, and we have representation of the Express Car Wash here if you guys have any questions. Thank you.
Julie, what's number 3 mean? Private access drive must be updated for consistency with the recorded. Is it? What's the change that's needed there?
Yeah, so it's not consistent with the recorded subdivision plat, so I can pull that up. for
What's
you
not,
guys.
is the name or the
It's-
layout or?
It's not a private access drive. I can't remember. I think it's just a private street. I can't remember what it's called. But the label is incorrect for what amounts to.
It's nothing with the dimensional standards.
As
It's
far
just,
as far as labels go to, is Morning Sun on the west side of 24? I know it's on the east side. It's the map sheet, the drawings listed as Morning Sun. I always assumed that was more like a access road from Walmart than Morning Sun.
Yeah, I thought it had a different name.
Yeah, but you know, the maps that are in here, they label
Sun, yeah, a morning sun going all the way through.
as if, yeah, exactly, this Morning Sun continues. And I thought it was just on one side of 24.
I believe this is Morning Sun Drive as well, within the Walmart PUD.
And I know it's in the staff report, it's buried in there somewhere, but could you talk about impact to water and wastewater use?
Yes, let's see here.
It is a car wash after all.
It is, yep.
Is there a recycling system? I guess we can ask the
Yeah, as
applicant.
far as the recycling system, that'd be a great question for the applicant. You know, as far as tap allotments and water usage, you know, that would all have to be run through our city utilities department would eventually have to approve that tap allocation.
So it'd be a tap allocation. It wouldn't be access to some other source of water like a well.
To the best of my knowledge, it would be the city's water system. It was, I think, even at an initial meeting about this potentially being an application. If memory serves me right, Kip Wiley, our operations director, we were talking about recycling systems at that point, which is pretty typical this day and age for car wash facilities. Just because it benefits everybody, including them and their operations.
So at this point, city utilities have not signed off or approved the water.
It's a commercial business, so it gets reviewed under that lens. Did Mr. Wiley provide any comments at this point? Yeah, CJ.
No, we have not received any comments specific to this application from the utilities department.
Well, that's a concern. I mean, I agree, a car wash does utilize quite a bit of water.
Let's show a reclaim system on the site utility plan.
What?
We can ask that.
And also, commissioners, I do want to note that the staff red lines comments packet that were submitted within your staff report. They did include some from the utilities department, so I apologize, and we can go through those. Just give me 1 second to pull that up. So Kelly Simpkins, she is a permanent tech with our utilities department. She did have a number of comments. So I apologize about that miscommunication there, but most of the comments were just regarding specific items within their plan. So the sewer service line shall include cleanouts installed at the property line was a comment. Water meter shall reside in a heated space to prevent freezing. Water service line shall be located a minimum distance of 5 feet from utilities. Water and sewer line separation of 10 feet is required. If this water stub out is not used, it will be required to be abandoned by the applicant. If the applicant chooses to have the water tap at this location, which was the location that they submitted on their site plan, they will have to hire a company to tap the water main. The applicant would be responsible for all costs associated, and it shall meet the City of Woodland Parks engineering specifications. If the sewer stub out is not used, it will be required to be abandoned by the applicant. And last comment that Ms. Sipkins had with the Utilities Department was to provide a water fixture count to the city, and backflow prevention device is provided on the site plan. That is needed to be provided on the site plan. Please provide proposed water and sewer usage. Redraw water service line to go straight into the building if possible. Utilize drip system for irrigation if needed. Tap fees paid upon ZDP issuing. And lastly, existing fire hydrant locations approved by Netco, and that was a question by Ms. Sipkins. So these comments were submitted back to the applicant, and staff has not received comments back from the applicant.
So at this point, they would not be included as conditions of approval of this application?
That's correct. At this specific point, not yet, because with the site plan portion of this, that's all done administratively with the planning department in association with the utilities and engineering department. So that's approved administratively prior to any zoning development permits being issued.
That was the key phrase, administratively. Okay.
And then I have an answer to that condition 3 and the private access drive label. On the subdivision plat, it's actually listed as a 35-foot public access and utility easement, not a private access drive. So that's the distinction we were wanting to make sure that that was just consistent with how it's actually platted.
I was involved in the Walmart PUD approval back in 2005.
In what capacity?
What? I was sitting in this chair
Okay.
on one of these up here.
Well, you've done other things, so like where's?
Yes, that's true. But in recollection, I know a lot of discussion was on the appearance of the Walmart building. And I don't know if that was a condition of the CUP at that point, or was that a separate agreement? So I am concerned the effort we've done on that project, as well as a number of other projects in town, to give it a certain character that fits in with other architecture in the building and from the preliminary drawings. I know we're not reviewing those tonight, but I am concerned on what we went through for Walmart. And as part of the same subdivision, are there architectural guidelines that will be implemented on this project?
We look at, I'm not aware of anything special that would apply to these other outlots. So there may be other things that were within a contract associated with Walmart specifically. Within our review, and you probably see in the comments that we sent back to the applicant, I'll let CJ read it since it's handy there, but we did flag that the current design does need some work to be more consistent with our architectural guidelines that we have here at the city. So go ahead, CJ.
Yeah, so the planning staff did make this comment on the proposed site plan. So we stated that the current proposed building facets do not convey mountain western aesthetic. Per the PUD requirements, ensure the building architecture will have wood elements that provide a rustic mountain-like feel. The proposed architectural design should include beams, timbers, and rock to emphasize this theme. Attractive earth tones should be implemented with which are consistent with the character of Woodland Park. Please also reference Municipal Code Section 18.33.180 Architectural Design Guidelines.
Very good, thank you.
And the applicant is aware of that information. So
I guess the other thing is when we looked at the overall PUD subdivision or PUD, we had various lots, one being the Walmart facility, and 2, 3, and 4 were more I guess on your list, one of them being the drink facility, and then 5 is a gas station, I believe, which is automotive function. And in overview, it seems like we have one automotive use, which was originally proposed, and now we have another one coming in, which takes away from the other restaurant
Dining.
financial businesses and that. So to move forward with this, it would seem that we maybe exchange the function of lot 5 with lot 4. And I know that's not what's being presented, but we're looking at modifications to the overall PUD. We should be able to put those type of criteria, at least the discussion, on the table.
I believe there's different owners for these parcels at this point in time. So I think that's to look at modifying uses for things that were not noticed is potentially, or for lots that were not part of the notice is potentially problematic, as well as just the involvement. Five are still ultimately interested in pursuing the fuel station that was slated for that particular parcel.
I'm just afraid of this whole area becoming automotive oriented. And then also I'd like staff to comment on the traffic study and the net results of that, because there was a lot of land was dated from the original PUD.
No, okay, so lot 2 is already been developed. That's where the Starbucks and I think the T-Mobile sit.
Yes,
And so lot 3 is still available, and that is also slated for a restaurant, and that one's what, a dine-in facility only, or was it a drive-through? CJ,
It was either bank, drive-through, or sit-in restaurant, all of those.
3 says eating,
Yes.
drinking place, eat in. Yeah. So it's this one that was potentially eat in or drive through. And then staff is very much aware of traffic issues and concerns. In fact, we did get some feedback from CDOT. Any development of any of these parcels here does require an updated access permit with CDOT. When they looked at the current level of service there, it is a level of service E, which is bad, with A being, the best. C is kind of like grades, report cards in school. So, C is just that average functioning. So when you get to E, it is definitely not good. The different property owners, we have encouraged them to work collaboratively on addressing traffic in this area, looking at things more holistic, and then potentially other traffic modifications so that things do flow better. And that's we've even thrown out the idea of a roundabout right there at that interchange between the public access and the where Morningstar Drive, between the light and into the site, there's that first little intersection. So we've looked at those kind of things, but they've not come back with full engineering of what's going to be the solution around any of that.
So the traffic study with this particular project would not be impacted by a requirement for modifications to the access there off of Morning Sun?
Do you remember what that letter said, CJ, in terms of that?
Well, as far as the CDOT portion of this goes, in order for them to, build this site and have it operational, they have to get an access permit through CDOT. So within this correspondence that you all have as well, CDOT does state that they need to revise the traffic impact study and submit to CDOT for a re-review. So if the applicant does not do that, then I presume they will not receive that access permit.
well, if CDOT requests additional improvements to Highway 24 or other streets, the applicant would be required to comply with those.
Believe so, yes.
And that would be the applicant as well as, you know, if they choose to do some cost sharing or anything like that with lot 5 or, you know, other potential applicants in the future. So
Is it prudent then to even consider this before that traffic study is completed? And CDOT,
Well, if they were not asking for a use change and it was a restaurant, they would still be doing, you know, it'd be an administrative review. And they would still do a traffic impact analysis and they would
Mhm.
still need the access permit for CDOT. So all that would happen behind the scenes and it just would never be in front of planning commission because it would be set up administratively. It's already set up for that. That process would be administrative. So the change in use, you know, the applicant can talk about this a little bit there. They had presented in their information that their volumes would actually be less than that of like a drive-through restaurant. So
What's the stacking distance typically in a drive-through restaurant?
I don't have that statistic memorized.
It's probably less than 23. Anyway, any other questions for staff at this point?
Well, the one comment that I'm thinking of right now is that typically we say, why didn't we talk about that? Or why didn't we consider that when this plan was first zone PUD? And we had uses and similar uses proposed for these outlots. And it's kind of disturbing that CDOT's coming back now and saying, we need to re-review. I mean, that should have been part of that overall at that time, encompassing similar commercial uses. And I'm just stating it because I think it's kind of disturbing that they're asking for it at this point.
unless they've just, you know, the assessment of the traffic there has changed significantly.
Oh,
So,
that's true.
yeah, we know it has. I mean, that part doesn't bother me as much as allowing a change in this PUD and then discovering that CDOT will not let them go forward with the project.
I think we ought to make that maybe a condition.
I don't think it's so much a case of CDOT will not let them go forward. It's more a case of what is the impact of this particular use? How can that be addressed? So it's really up to this applicant and their engineers to propose the solutions. CDOT's really more saying, you know, yay or nay to the proposed solution as opposed to mandating what the change needs to be. And a lot of times it's most of development is a math problem. So a lot of time it's you know, just the cost associated with what is the change that's required, and will my project cash flow if I have to make that kind of a change. Okay.
Anything else for now? And we'll invite the applicant to come forward and make comment.
Tess Hawkins, Baseline Engineering, representing 70 billion development, BIA Real Estate, Champion Express Car Wash. I do want to answer every question that was posed. I do have answers to all of those questions. I did not write fast enough to get them all down, so I think it'll probably be best if we just run around to each commissioner to get those questions answered. I will say thank you to staff for getting us to this point in the application. The high level thing that I do want to say is the car wash is a decrease in impacts in almost every category. We are decreasing the building coverage. We are decreasing traffic. We did submit a traffic trip generation letter to staff, and it does compare the traffic numbers contemplated for a quick service restaurant versus a car wash, and this does come from the IT manual, which CDOT also uses to calculate traffic. In a nutshell, think about how often you eat versus how often you wash your car. So our peak times are usually on the weekends, and then we also have a decrease in traffic during the winter folks aren't washing their cars that often in the winter. I can go through all the numbers and compare them individually, but just in a nutshell, that's the way to think about how much traffic we're bringing to this site. Building coverage, trip generation, surface parking, we're also decreasing that. As far as the water, we do use a water reclamation system for this car wash, and we have been in contact with Kelly and Kipps probably since last summer, actually last spring, having these discussions with them. Our reclamation system recycles up to 81% of its water. Right, and we do have numbers to prove that for existing car washes as well. It usually is averaging around the 70% area, but Champion Express is contracting with a new reclamation company to get to that 80% number. It's their next generation that they're working with to implement on their new car washes. The other thing to add to that water piece of it, to give you kind of a comparison. I broke down the numbers of how much water is recycled per car, and each car uses less fresh water than a high maintenance teenage girl would use a single shower, a 15-minute shower. And that's in terms of gallons, as far as fresh water versus water that's coming through the reclamation system. The one thing I want to address that I heard that was brought up in the PUD development plan, we do mention that the car wash is an added use. It's not fully replacing the QSR. The QSR is still a applicable use. So if something did happen with his car wash, the numbers didn't work out, as Karen was mentioning, that quick service restaurant still could come in without coming through a PUD amendment again. And we're working with staff to amend that development plan, that line area, to accommodate the QSR and the Champion Express car wash, so both can live simultaneously in that parking plan. Let me see, I'm just going down my list here. We're working with staff on the building. Ken, I know you had that concern with architectural requirements. Yeah, we are working with that. We're kind of crunching numbers on the best materials, as well as where to place those materials on the facade that would best meet the need that CJ mentioned. Just haven't gotten to a solution yet. We will be meeting. I haven't told you this, but we'll try to schedule a meeting with you all next week to make sure we're moving in the right direction on that. Great. I think at a high level, that is what I have. The last thing, yes, it is a level of service E. We did only receive those CDOT comments today, so I haven't had a full chance to I haven't had a lot of time to digest those completely. The intersection, according to CDOT, is at a level service E. F is the last grade on that scale. Again, we have less of an impact as far as trip generation goes. That quick service restaurant would definitely boost those numbers dramatically. The traffic study was completed in 2005. In today's ITE manual, the 10th, I think we're on the 11th generation of the ITE manual. The car wash's trip generation is still underneath the quick service restaurant trip generation from 2005. And I think, Carol, you mentioned that we all know that the population here has increased since 2005, and the car wash is still less of an impact than it is now than it was in 2005. And then, yeah, I can answer the specific questions that you all have. Oh, and I do have the applicant. He is on Zoom. Alan Kershaw is online here to speak more towards operations if there's operational questions.
Any questions?
The only question I had, it's a tunnel car wash. There's no individual bays except for the vacuum stations.
Correct.
Okay.
Can I ask, was CDOT worried about the homes that are behind there? Do I have the right placing of where that's at? the traffic would maybe impede part of getting back to those homes behind you?
I don't recall that coming up as a part of it.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't answer that question yet.
Okay, that's okay.
Em, do you have any questions? Larry?
Well, Carol kind of alluded about the water issue, and I certainly share that concern. And I also heard CJ talk about the comments coming from the city utilities, which talked about they wanted to have some more information about water usage. But certainly with the recycling effort of the car wash, I just think we need to know this information if we're going to allow a change of use. And has it been allocated, what level of water usage was that originally allocated for? Maybe you know, maybe you don't. But what kind of increase are we seeing with this particular water use is a concern?
And I can speak a little bit towards that. I don't have the direct numbers on what a quick service restaurant would use as far as water usage. But again, I'll state that 81% of the water is recycled. And that is a high number per car. If you think about it in gallons, Alan may have the numbers in front of him. But it ended up, Alan, please correct me if I'm wrong, 12 to 15 gallons of fresh water per car. And if you think about that in the grand scheme of things, think about how much water you may use in a long shower.
Hey, Ches, this
Yeah.
Alan.
Yes, hello.
Yes, so I'm Alan Kirshoff with 7B Building and Development, representing Champion Express. So we use about 17 gallons of fresh water per car with that reclaim, and we discharge about 12 gallons into the sewer system per car.
I would make one comment. I wash my car more in the wintertime than the summertime because of all the stuff on the highways.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that. And that number comes from just 7B's experience with their previous car washes. They do have locations in Durand Junction, Durango.
Okay.
I think those are the two existing locations that are already built. But yeah, they monitor their traffic generation numbers, and they usually go down in the winter. I guess some people don't care, Carol.
Just for what I see here on the utility plan, it does say it's a proposed 1.5 inch meter. Water service meter, 1.5 inch line.
For some reason, I thought Kelly
That's
had
not a
asked for it.
large.
Yeah, Kelly had asked for it to be increased, I thought, but yeah, you're right. That's still not very large. Okay.
One correction, that is actually should be a 2-inch Allen. I think
It's a 2-inch line into the building. It spans to 2 inch after the meter
It's-
according to the
yeah,
utility plan.
1.5 and expands to a 2-inch. Yeah, you are correct.
Nothing else for now, but thank you. We don't have anybody signed up on the list for public hearing or public comment. We'd like to open the public hearing. And we have another list. Okay, very good. Well, you can speak now if you like, and we can certainly take your comments on the next issue. Anyone else in the audience wanting to speak? David, anybody online? with their hands raised? No hands raised. Last chance. Before we close the public hearing. Public hearing is now closed. So if you can still continue talking or rebuttal to the silence, but
Yeah. I just want to, hammer down that, the car wash is a less intense use in every shape, conform than the quick service restaurant. And again, the quick service restaurant is still on the table for that location. We're not pulling that from the PUD. The PUD language says that we are proposing states lot 4, I think lot 4 and 5 are interchangeable. Lot 4 shall allow a QSR and a express tunnel car wash. So either or could happen if, not and, let me wrap up, come up, or, so, yeah, we're not developing both on one lot. That is not the case here. But yeah, the car wash is a less intense use in every way, shape, and form. I just want to nail it home. And yeah, we are working with staff on the site plan comments, which is separate from this PUD. This is just a land use exercise.
Thank you. Discussion, comments, thoughts? And we'll clarify the issue that we're addressing tonight. And we have a modification to the PUD. And there's also a site plan review. Are we getting into the site plan review, or is that an administrative process?
We reviewing that as administrative. Okay. What if the use is set up that this is potentially a use at this location, the site plan review, the full level detail would be administrative. In terms of when that would be.
Sidewalk and pedestrian access would be handled administratively.
Yep.
And
landscaping. But yeah, and then we shared with you comments, this as part of all of that. And there are things that still need to be buttoned down before that would be approved and permits would be issued, starting with the use.
So we're basically here to review the proposed additional use for lot 4.
Correct.
My comments, again, going back, if we can't change the usage from this lot and lot 5, I'm concerned about making it too auto intensive at this intersection. That was obviously the original PUD, an attempt to prevent that by allocating different uses to different lots.
And I remember those arguments well, but are you concerned more from aesthetics or from oversaturation of a specific use? Or the inability to use it for its intended, what we originally intended in the PUD?
I just, while we're not taking the original proposed use away, we're adding a new use.
Gotcha.
And obviously, once that building's constructed, going back to another use is more difficult. So I guess I'm questioning, do we want to change what was originally proposed?
Well, actually, we're replacing a use. The use was originally approved for a restaurant. Now there's being requested to be changed to car wash. So it is a change of use.
Yes.
It is an additional use, though. They still reserve the right to.
So this has
Not
happened
adequate
before from what I can look at
restaurant.
in the submittal, right? The original
I'm
uses.
sorry, Mr. Brown was talking,
I'm
so I
sorry.
didn't quite understand. I got lost there.
No, actually, in the applicant made the comment as well, too. The wording and some of we have here in the staff recommendation is a little unclear. It suggests that we're changing the use from the restaurants to the car wash. In fact, we're adding an additional use. And
that's
the
a
chair
staff.
was accurate in his wording too, so.
Yeah, that's a staff mistake that I will own, and it does say that in their application that they are looking to make the option of developing the site with a restaurant or a car wash is what they are after. So.
With,
Okay, so when I read this document, there was a reference to originally the lots were set up for quick service restaurants, drive-throughs, all three of them at least. And then it was changed to a dine-in restaurant, a bank, and a quick serve restaurant, as I recall. It seems like I read that somewhere in this packet.
Part of what happened with the PUD approval documents is in the narrative. They lumped lots 2 through 4 together. So those things are talked about together within the narrative with the approved Walmart PUD. And it's on the PUD drawing set that you see that table that CJ had highlighted, where it then splits the lots out individually and addresses lots 2, 3, and 4 separately with different use. Restaurant use, and then adding the possibility of or a car wash. And not touching lots 2 and 3.
Okay.
And specifically, Commissioner, just driving home the point that Karen just made within your staff report, you and the application, we do have that proposed language. So at the end of the existing language, it states, in addition, lot 4, which is, specifically excluding all of the other lots within the plan unit development. So lot 4 is allowed to be an automated express style car wash. So it is only lot 4, not.
And by the way, or perhaps automated car wash. I'm not sure, express style gets a little bit too much.
That's their wording, sir.
That's their sort of their proprietary method of lining them up or something, apparently.
It certainly narrows the type of car wash.
Probably need a new definition for that.
That's a different meeting night.
We already passed the A's, commissioners.
Then we finished C, remember?
That's right.
You're in seats.
And when was this original? The decision on what,
2005.
2005, so quite a while
2005
ago.
was the original rezone, yeah, as well as the 2007 was the final plat.
I guess I'd need to look at what the rest of the land availability is and are we down to the last few pieces used for specific things? It seems like not putting the restaurant there and putting a car wash that's going to create less traffic doesn't hurt us, and the other uses don't really hurt us. And it's a business that wants to do business here. And it hasn't had another business build anything since 2005. So that's kind of a thought there too.
And we still have 3 on the pocket. Develop. Something else.
5 would be a gas station, and I guess 3 could be one of the originally proposed uses.
Read specifically what lot 3 says.
Lot 3 is specifically for eating/drinking place, eat in. So this would be like a typical dine-in restaurant. Sit down restaurant. And then just to back up your point, Mr. Chair, yes, lot 5 is designated for fuel/gas station.
And we're only talking about lot 4 at this time.
That's correct.
Well, the request is specifically for lot 4, but we are reviewing the entire PUD.
And it doesn't preclude us from making other lot information changes at this time too, right? I know it's not requested, but
It wasn't noticed that way. It was noticed just around lot 4, and
Yeah.
it's only, the applicant has only made a
Gotcha.
request
Okay.
with regard to lot 4, and there are different property owners involved.
yep, fair enough. Lot 4 it is. I don't have an issue.
Yeah, I have no objection
I don't-
to the change in use that's proposed if people are, if we're happy we get the wording right.
Any more discussion? If not, we'd entertain a motion.
Back to them.
Too
CJ,
many
can-
pages.
yeah, CJ,
Yeah.
can you bring up the staff recommendation again?
It's on page
Yes, not a
106.
problem.
440 pages. Scroll back up.
CJ, just bring it up.
Well, I'll move to recommend approval of the Walmart PUD amendment to change the use from eating, drinking place, eat in, drive-through to allow a car wash on lot 4 of the Walmart Center and amend building and building parking data subject to the 3 conditions found in the staff report.
Very good.
And just to clarify, you're suggesting to change the use, not add an additional use option for lot 4.
Well,
Maybe in item 1, to say it's where it says to reflect the change in use, to say to reflect the additional use. That work, then we're
okay.
alternatively, we could take the full sentence and we figure out how to reference where it adds in, but I'm not sure what the right reference is.
So I'm in favor of this being the and or the additional use
Yeah,
option.
Okay. I agree to that amendment.
Motion in a second.
Second.
Larry, in a second there? Was that a second, Larry?
No,
Carol second.
Very good. Larry had already done so.
Is that with the revision I mentioned in 1?
yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Any discussion? There we go. We can take a vote, please.
Okay. And just so we're clear, the motion is to add the additional use is what I heard to, okay. So Commissioner Harvey,
Yes.
Commissioner Kennedy,
Yes.
Commissioner Larson,
Yes.
Commissioner Nielsen,
Yes.
Chair Hartsfield,
Yes,
and Vice Chair Brown.
Yes.
Thank you.
very good. Is that item C? Moving on to item D.
We have 3 minutes to stretch.
Very good. Let's take until 8:45.
Please, thank you.
Continue our meeting, 8:45. We have next on the agenda, it's SUB 2023-01, the Haven at Paradise Final Plat, request by Frankie Valenzuela of Ventus LLC and Jonathan James of Ventus LLC for a final plat of 25 lots on a 35.78 acre tract of land located in section 19 and section 30. Baron, you have staff report? Or is that
CJ wanted to
again?
go through everything to us.
This is me again. I hope after tonight you won't get tired of me, but
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
before we hear the presentation, I want to disclose that we have received some correspondence on our desk. And they are from 3 separate entities, one being the Teller Trail Team, the other one being Medicine Wheel, and the other one being HOSP, which is the Trails and Open Space Coalition. I have been working with all 3 of those in conjunction with a project I'm working on called Complete Ring the Peak Project trail system. I just wanted to disclose that I have had current and direct relationship with those 3 entities, but I believe I can make a fair decision, right? Based on the information. It's in the packet and over here at the public hearing.
thank you for the disclosure. Any comments or concerns?
I also want to add that Commissioner Larson was very diligent, that a couple of these emails went directly to him. And he pushed back in a very kind way and said, it's a quasi judicial item. This needs to go through staff and be shared with the commission as a whole. And he did that immediately. And that's what you have this evening is copies of all 3 of those emails. So thank you for your diligence on that.
Very good. With that, CJ, you're on.
okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. As stated, so this is the final plat application for the Haven at Paradise. The proposed site is generally located north of Kings Crown Road and east of Highway 24, as you can see from the slide. On the left-hand side of the screen, you will see the overall outline of the top of, I'm sorry, on the right-hand side of the screen, the overall outline of the top of Paradise Master Plan, which is the proposed final plat is included in. Other subdivisions located within the amended top of Paradise Master Plan area that have received final plat approvals include filings within the Paradise of Colorado, Highlands in Paradise, and Thunderbird subdivisions. The subject property, which is circled in red on the left-hand side of your screen, is zoned suburban residential. On the right-hand side of the screen, you will see an aerial photo of the proposed subdivision outlined in red. And also, if you look on the right-hand side of the screen, we have some labels here. So this is a city open space down at the bottom of the subdivision, Kings Crown Road, and then at the top here is Pike National Forest.
CJ, can you back that up? Next to that city open space, what is the property to the east? Is that Pike National Forest?
That I will have to double check that, but I believe it is Pike National Forest.
No, it is private property.
I can look that up
Yeah.
while you continue.
Okay, perfect. In general, in a major subdivision, this sort of planning involves construction of new streets, sidewalks, curbs, gutters, and stormwater detention, extension of municipal facilities and dry utilities. Authorization of a major subdivision is a two-step public process with approval of a preliminary plat, which in this case was approved in 2019, with 2 extensions in 2021 and 2022. And submission of a final plat, a final subdivision plat, complete with public hearings from the Planning Commission and City Council. The applicant proposes to develop 25 lots for single-family dwelling units. The residential use is subject to administrative approval of a zoning development permit for each individual dwelling unit. The ZDP process also provides a compliance check for criteria such as setbacks, height, parking, landscape, and other site improvements for utilities, grading, drainage, and erosion control. The preliminary plat for this project consists of 35.77 acres, with 24 residential lots, was originally approved on April 9th, 2019. As mentioned previously, there was 2 extensions granted. The approved preliminary plot includes tract A for stormwater detention, as well as tract B, which was for private open space owned and maintained by the homeowners association. This tract was originally intended for the use of residents of the Haven at Paradise and is to include a trail system throughout the tract. I'd also like to note that the no trail easements exist on this lot, and the preliminary plat proposal was to construct trails throughout the tract. Here on the screen, you will see the approved preliminary plat. When referencing tract B is right here on your screen on the right-hand side of the screen. So again, this was proposed open space for private use of the development. Again, there was no trail easements currently on the property. The trails were just proposed to be built on the property. And tract A down at the bottom left-hand side of your screen is the detention pond.
Did you point out the city open space?
The city open space is not within this subdivision, but it would be right here.
Adjacent to the south.
Yep.
Thank you.
And then again, we're looking at the preliminary plat,
This is the preliminary plat, correct?
right? And there's a note regarding that tract B open space. Could you read that?
Let's see, I don't have the exact language, but let's see here.
I have it. I can read it.
Okay.
Am I progressive here to work correctly? Tract B is, again, preliminary plat, tract B is reserved for private open space and will be owned and maintained by the homeowners association unless the developer decides to dedicate the open space to the city at the time of final plat review and approval.
Thank you, Larry. Go ahead, CJ.
Thank you, Commissioner. And one other note, as far as the preliminary plat approval goes, with the preliminary plat approval, also included a variance from municipal code section 17.40.140 to reduce the minimum right-of-way width from 50 feet to 40 feet, with 30-foot front setbacks on the residential lots, as well as the following conditions. So the park fees shall be paid prior to recordation of the final plat, with stipulation that these park fees are be used to develop Chimney Park or other recreational amenities in Paradise Estates or Thunderbird subdivisions. Please know that the fee increases every year and will be adjusted in the amount finalized when zoning permits are issued. The second condition was a wildfire mitigation plan shall be submitted to the city and to Northeast Teller County Fire Protection District for review and implementation by the developer prior to final plat approval. And the third was complete the water line loop from Red Haven to Blue Haven cul-de-sac during the first phase.
Where are we with those items? Those been completed?
So yeah, those were the conditions of approval for the preliminary plat. Yep. So here on this screen, the current application is for the Haven at Paradise final plat. Similar to the preliminary plat, the proposed final plat is for 35.77 acres of land. However, the lot configuration is different in that the plat for 25 residential lots and 1 tract for stormwater detention. The tract that was originally proposed as open space within the Haven at Paradise, which was tract B on the preliminary plat, is now lot 25. It's now intended for a residential lot that is approximately 528,437 square feet in size, and which will be accessed off of Kings Crown Road.
Okay, CJ, are there any other changes in between the preliminary and the final?
No, sir.
Just the. Okay,
B.
Yes,
just
sir.
track B.
This final plat does not include any dedication of open space or parkland. However, it still meets the city's open space requirements. The parkland requirements for all filings within the Top of Paradise Master Plan were satisfied through the previous dedication of Chimney Park, and the first filing of Thunderbird Estates was approved with the dedication of a tract next to Woodland Park High School, along with a number of tracts that provide trail corridors. For future filings within the Top of Paradise Master Plan area, including this proposal, the applicant has agreed to pay park fees with the stipulation that the fees be collected to develop Chimney Park or other public recreation amenities in Paradise Estates or Thunderbird subdivision. After extension, the applicant submitted a zoning development permit application to the city of Woodland Park for approval of grading and infrastructure plans. City staff administratively approved this ZDP on June 27th of 2022, and the construction has commenced on the site. The approved construction documents were attached within your staff report. Drainage, water, and sewer, as well as access and traffic flow, are consistent with the preliminary plat approval, which includes the right-of-way width reduction of Blue Haven Place and Red Haven Place, which are proposed to be 40-foot wide public right-of-ways. This reduction of the right-of-way width is acceptable since the utility companies prefer to install their infrastructure outside of the right-of-way easements on private property. Staff reviewed section 17.24.080 in the evaluation and analysis of this final plat application. The design should conform to the preliminary plat. This complies. The final plat design does conform to the preliminary plat, with the exception that the tract was originally proposed as open space within Haven at Paradise, tract B, is now intended for a residential lot. which will be accessed off of Kings Crown Road. The final plat does not include any dedication to the parks and open space. However, it still meets city requirements due to the previous dedications, as previously mentioned with Chimney Park and the dedication of tracks along the high school and number of tracks that provide trail corridors. Information. This is a lengthy list of technical information required to be contained on the final plat. Staff states that this does comply. The applicant has included all information on the final plat. No subdivision shall be approved unless all lots have sufficient frontage. Staff found that this does comply and all lots have sufficient frontage. All easements meet the standards set forth within the Woodland Park Municipal Code. This does comply. All proposed easements meet standards set forth in 17.40.170. The proposed lot shall have no foreseeable difficulties. This does comply. Staff believes that there will be no foreseeable difficulties. Each lot resulting from a new subdivision has to meet proper land use intensity ratios. Staff found that this does comply. Each lot has a maximum site coverage of 20% of the lot area, and plats note number 7 covers this regulation. Each subdivision for residential use shall pay a park fee in the amount established by the city council. Staff found that this may comply. Consistent with the condition of approval imposed at preliminary plat, park fees with the stipulation that the fees will be collected to be used to develop Chimney Park or other recreational amenities in Paradise Estates or Thunderbird subdivision must be paid prior to final recording of the final plat. Application was referred to the city departments listed here on this slide. And staff's recommendation is to move to recommend approval of the Haven at Paradise final plat, subject to the following conditions. 1, the developer must enter into a subdivision development agreement, including financial guarantee for the cost estimate of the remaining infrastructure to be installed. The agreement shall be the city's standard subdivision development agreement with any amenities or additions as required by the city. Any special requirements unique to a particular subdivision due to terrain, etc., shall be defined in this agreement. The association with the administrative site plan review, the applicant must provide updated drawings that respond and comply with all comments set forth within city staff redline application comment. Number 2. Park fees must be paid prior to recording of the final plat. Number 3, a wildlife mitigation plan shall be submitted to the city and Northeast Teller County Fire Protection District for review and approval. Number 4, a plat note to final plat documenting the requirement for a 30-foot front setback. And lastly, number 5, prior to recording the final plat, city engineer must approve the waterline easement location at the end of Red Haven Place. This concludes my presentation, commissioners. I'm available for any questions. We have Frankie here as well, if you have any questions for him.
Very good. Here's questions.
Yeah. One question about all lots being suitable. There had been discussion at the time of the preliminary plat approval of the amount of frontage on lots onto the eastern portion of the property. And they were adjusted so that they all hit 40 feet. Is that an area as it's already being put in, there's a lot of work being done. I know the roads aren't finished as such too, but is it still clear that this works all right for driveway slopes and other sorts of access points? What I don't want to hear is we need a variance because it really didn't work right.
Sure. Yeah. And that was assessed again during the infrastructure, the ZDPs that were approved administratively by staff. So that's the reason that they can start the construction on that side as well. So.
Okay. Anything else now?
I'm still confused about lot B or whatever we're calling it.
Yeah.
Tract B.
So
Is that, when you say it's for residential use, is one lot? That's
correct. So as the final plat is proposed, lot 25, as you see here on the screen, would be one residential lot.
Okay. It was in the preliminary plat, I know it was envisioned to be used as open space for the residents on the two, within that development. And it would not be open to the public, correct?
That was correct. It was initially intended during the preliminary plat process for private use of the Haven at Paradise, this specific subdivision
And now that is a one residential lot.
being proposed, yes.
Okay, it has the applicant explained that that would be one residence on a 12-acre lot.
That's a great question for the applicant. I
Okay.
don't want to speak on behalf of them.
Okay, that'd be cool, but okay,
Right.
okay.
I was thinking the people kind of at the top are getting the lion's share anyway.
Any questions for staff now?
The one question at that time, when the preliminary plat was approved, and I know you weren't here to be witness to it. Were there any discussions about the opening of that area for the public? There'd be easements granted for trails to connect public open space to the city that currently is in place to cross this track to get to the Pike National Park.
Right, thank you, Commissioner. As far as opening it up for public, within my research of reading the past staff reports and minutes, I don't recall if there was a specific conversation on that portion. But I will state that I do have a copy of a comment from the United States Department of Agriculture, and they expressed that they did not want any corridor or trail corridors leading from that parcel to Pike National Forest. So they're against any additional trail connections on that property.
Do I recollect correctly from the write-up that there was reference to comments at the city council review of the preliminary plat? That they thought just because that they thought that expressed an interest that the city would be happy to take this because it would be a burden for a private party to be responsible for it.
Yeah, that was
And-
mentioned, and
and-
I know Frankie can speak on that as well, but the city did offer that to be,
Frankly,
city owned.
Frankie's the applicant.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Frankie.
Yeah, I was on council then. That was a discussion that the city take over the management of that parcel for public access, but I was not aware of USDA's.
Yeah,
Did they
Is it
specify
USDA
why?
or US Forest Service.
My understanding, and
part of
we've since
GSDA.
followed up with the Forest Service on different projects. And my understanding is, like many different agencies, they're just under-resourced. So anytime you end up with these social trails or other connections where it's not part of their established network, they're struggling to take care of the established trail network and don't have that ability to the unofficial author trails and connections that happen.
Okay.
And so since they're struggling with what's currently part of their system, they're not, my understanding is they're not looking to make any additions to that.
Okay.
right, they're not looking for any, there are existing trails that are heavily used through there. It's heavy use, multiple trails through there.
Mhm.
So I mean, the Forest Service may like to say, we don't want to set up additional trails, but those are existing trails that people both in the neighborhood and from elsewhere use.
And they might be social trails as well, commissioners, but I do have the specific language. So with this comment in reviewing the preliminary subdivision plat, please keep in mind the following. And the second bullet here is no construction of trails from the proposed subdivision onto national forest.
So
That's
essentially, if they're
a piece of
established, they're established, but
Then
just
they're
don't
established.
construct anything new.
Exactly. No, 'cause-
Okay.
But
Yeah,
there's multiple trails that already exist, so that's.
Well, but they're social trails and frankly, people are trespassing. It's private property.
and to
No, a trespass
address
is
your
only
comment,
a private
Mr.
property.
Commissioner Larson, that comment was from February 21st of 19 during the preliminary plat process.
Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna ask the applicant if he'd come forward and make any comments you'd like to.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for having me. So as part of our due diligence processes before the prelim plat and post, we did also reach out to USDA and the fire services. And we also spoke with our neighbors to better understand what they wanted. Originally, track B was gonna be kept within, our development company. And one of the owners would most likely live on the premises, right? So we would kind of keep it as like an HOA. It's really difficult to build on that lot, right? So we just wanted to just designate it and say, hey, it's lot 25. No, I mean, you can. I'm sure you've all been there, but it'll be extremely hard to build there. So, but we did do our due diligence to make sure that we were working with everyone, around, abiding by city codes and what USDA wants to see. And it at the end of it, it sounded like our neighbors, USDA and the Forest Service preferred not to get, preferred us not to donate that and for us to maintain. So that's the reason why we ended up changing it from track B to lot 25. That's all I have in response to track B.
Another question about track B, if it is now going to be a residential lot, albeit one difficult to build on, would it be posted, therefore prohibiting the social trails that now exist?
I would have to talk it over with my team. I mean, I can't answer that question right now, but myself speaking, I would say we would kind of keep it the same, right? But we would, if it got really bad, we would have to, up the maintenance on it and all that, but we're not really looking to change things up on it.
Okay.
Excuse me. I have a clarifying question. Staff was under the impression that you wanted this to be a lot available for residential development. Is that the case? Because that's what we understand the application is.
Yeah, that's the intent, but again, I don't know what could happen in the future. We don't want to be able to, we figured if we could get it platted that way, we would have more freedom to be able to do something there in the future if we did want to set up some sort of like cabin or kind of like a, like an area for the HOA versus having to come back and try to get a variance to change it.
So like if you wanted to put a clubhouse or something on there, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Back when the preliminary plat was approved in 1999, the city council, as Lisa mentioned, strongly encouraged that that particular tract be dedicated to the city. Have you thought about dedication to the city of that tract?
I spoke, or the partnership spoke about it, and at that time, we didn't want to make the call without doing our due diligence. So that's why we, number one, we spoke to the neighbors, we spoke to the Forest Service, USDA, and at the end, we decided that we would just try to get it platted as lot 25. And that we would at that time pay the park fees.
Could you, when you say you talk to the neighbors, I think it's interesting that neighbors would have an issue. I know lots of neighbors in the area. To the property to the east is owned by someone from Colorado Springs who had concerns that such that they wished they ultimately made a point of shutting down the so-called bathtub trail, which is a popular trail shown on Pikes Peak Atlas and other maps. And they made a point of stopping access to that. What other neighbors are there that objected to the idea of the land continuing to be used as open space?
We only spoke to about half a dozen.
Well, yeah, can you, if not names, can you describe to me who are these people? Where did they live?
So there's a house so right when you go into the driveway, there's a house to the left. There's a house to the right, and then down on down on Kings Crown Road where people park to access it. There's a few houses to the right of that, so we reached out to them as well.
Okay, the ones to the left and the right, they're not even close by. They're a quarter mile away the
Yeah.
other direction. So I'm
Yeah.
not-
But I mean, I just meant, or what I meant was like the neighbors that are touching our actual development. Or literally adjacent.
You had a lot of development to bring in utilities and roads and drainage. So on lot 25, are there utilities available for that parcel?
No,
Are there utilities in Kings Crown Road?
or so on Kings Crown Road, we're tapping in from our lot to that, and we have a loop going all around with our main.
But that,
But we only have 24 service lines.
right, so I'm just wondering how we're getting utilities for the development of lot 25.
Pretty much whoever buys lot 17 theoretically would have access to 25.
Are you putting water pipes into service lot 25?
No, sir.
No.
Can I ask why 17 isn't for sale?
My partner is looking to make that his primary residence.
I see. You should do 25. You'll have 12 acres.
Well, it's a pretty complicated build. I mean, I can go
Okay.
into the details, but if we're over 150 feet, we have to fire sprinkler the entire house and all that, right? If they build on lots, a small cottage on 17, then they could build, then they would just have more access to land per se.
Okay, usable land.
Usable land. I
Yeah.
mean, to build on 25, it's really not realistic, right? You would have to build on 17 to really maybe
Okay.
2/3 of 17 and
Okay,
a third on.
okay. That makes
I don't understand that. Building a home on 2 lots,
No, what I'm saying is. In order to build on 25. We would have to set up an easement for 17 and 25. So what we thought was, well, my partner Jonathan would most likely keep 17. And at that time, he would have access to either build on 17 or on 25. Depending on I don't have the topo map on me, but building on solely 25 would be very difficult. That's what that's why I alluded to. If you were to build on 17 and 25, the best place would be maybe 2/3 on 17 and a third on 25.
I suppose that when it was originally preliminary platted approval, it was understood that it was going to be difficult to do that, and that's why it ended up as open space.
I don't know the details on. That was the configurations of the lots that work, or the lot layout that worked best. That's why my partner Jonathan mentioned to me, I would like to keep 17. Let's just change track B to 25.
Any other questions? Ms. Brown?
Yeah, but I guess I had a question of staff and neglected to ask it at the time, but I'm going to ask it now because I think it's relevant before we get into the public hearing. And that's the section dealing with the standards for a PUD, a final plat, and it talks about the park capital fees and dedication of land. And the last portion of that section says, or your comment says, consistent with the condition of approval of the opposed at the preliminary plat. Well, the preliminary plat is definitely says that this area should be open space, private. And is there a process that needs to go through to amend the preliminary plat? Because it says the final plat should be in conformance with the preliminary.
It's been quite a while, but over 6 months ago, I did talk to the prior planning director about this. This developer's desire to change tract B from open space to a residential lot. She had said because of those other land dedications and stuff, there was some flexibility in there in terms of that ability to do this. Because of that flexibility that had already been put in place through prior approvals, staff's interpretation was that this was largely consistent with the final plat. So it may be just y'all breaking in new staff a little bit and telling me, no, Karen, we want these to look, the final plat to look exactly like the preliminary plat that comes in. And if that's the case, we will readjust for when somebody does want to amend something to require that change. But since the lot configuration wasn't changing and that open space requirement had otherwise previously been satisfied, that's why we brought this one forward in this format.
Yeah.
I apologize, I'm like slightly crosswise with the applicant, but staff's understanding with lot 25 was to be or is to be a residential lot. So the way it's currently shown on this plat, it's potentially available, if it were recorded this way, it would be available for separate sale to a different party, since there's no other restriction associated with it in terms of its use.
Larry, were you working off of one completed plat preparation ordinance? 17-24-070.
1736.
Okay, all right, okay, because I thought it was even amplifying what Larry just said. 17-24.070 completed plat preparation. A, the design shall conform to the preliminary plat if applicable as conditionally approved. And this doesn't seem to conform. I mean, it's a different proposal, which materially is different from the first. I mean, I don't know. Let's wait to summarize. I'll get to some of the summary earlier than I might have, but this is like, it looks to me like it's a bait and switch. There's an approval with this was an important part of everyone thinking this is a good development in the way it was, and part of the review of the whole package. There was open space, even if not for the public as might have been preferred. It was open space, be available to the adjacent residents, and the expectation that it would probably be given to the city eventually. And not necessarily given for nothing. There's park fees I guess they're now in excess of $2,000 per lot. I'm not sure where it finally is now, that no doubt would be considered favorably for potential waiver if the lot was provided. But whatever, it was clearly intended that space was not going to be developed. And say that is a big part of what made it attractive to do. I was on the planning commission at the time. I thought it looked like a good package, and it preserved that open space, which is also critical open space as far as connecting disconnected parts of the Forest Service, particularly since the bathtub trail, the owner wants to close it down. That's an area which people use heavily on the social trails there to get to further north to connect up with Forest Service property. Other sort of specific issues I had with this. 17-24-040. After reviewing the final plat to assure its completeness, the city planner shall present that plat to both the Planning Commission and the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board for review. My recollection is that the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board was also supportive of this as open space and had done that prior to the preliminary plat. But this says, after reviewing the final plat to assure its completeness, needs to go back to the Parks and Recreation Board. Even if there were some flexibility in that, while they saw it before the preliminary plat, not what the state ordinance says. If there's no change in anything relevant to Parks and Recreation, maybe you wouldn't worry about it. I do worry about it. This is a fundamental change in the attractiveness of this development to our city. And Parks and Recreation Board has never, hasn't had a chance to weigh in on it. Ordinarily, when we consider these things, before preliminary plats, they give a recommendation. We hear about it. That's one of the things we heard at the time we approved the preliminary plat. And it was part of the history that went into the city council's approval of the preliminary plat. So it seemed to me that to restore it, at the very least, this should go back to the Parks and Recreation Board to see what they think of this now as open space, since there is no open space. They may have some comments on park fees and what kind of adjustment we made before the Planning Commission acts upon it. Because this is a big deal. It's not a small, it's not just one house. It's an important parcel. The reason there's a parking lot on Kings Crown Road adjacent to this that holds about 10 cars is because a lot of people use it. That open space, the open space that is existing now, if this becomes blocked off, that open space will only connect by walking parallel to Kings Crown Road to the end where in the southern section you could come down, as opposed to being a connector between two parts of the national forest. And that's why people use it, because it is so central to the access for people, not just in the area. Neighbors walk it. People from other ones drive to there so that they can walk it because it's so important. All right, well, you got my sense enough of this. I have another.
So just as a counter comment or just a counterpoint view, the land is difficult to build on, may not be built on. It doesn't have utilities provided to it as a residential lot would typically. It's going to be, difficult. So, but anyway, the Forest Service, according to the staff, has written a letter that they don't want access to that point through the national forest. Now that doesn't. Yeah.
And that was 3 years
for their
ago, and they
convenience,
don't like
whatever.
They don't.
But people like trails, people like to walk. I don't know what the difficulty for them would be to leave it as open space versus that one lot that they don't plan to build on. I don't know why they want to change it necessarily.
Particularly if there was a waiver of some or all of the park fees.
Yeah, I don't know. But it didn't sound like it was going to turn into anything different by what they're asking for necessarily, other than it could.
Well, it could, but we also have the option to sell that section, right? Like,
gotcha.
If it's just B, then we're held with all due respect, kind of hostage to what we can't do anything with it. But if it's platted as a lot 25, and myself and my partner were able to keep it, we would most likely keep it the same.
There was a smaller number. There were the 24 preliminary. It had been the master plan, as I recall, had a smaller number, like in the order of 20 or so lots. And the number was expanded beyond what the master plan had indicated for that area. And part of the reason people thought it was attractive was because open space was preserved. This is what I'm referring to a bait and switch. It was an attractive proposal presented to be a great asset to the neighborhood and to the city. And now what we're seeing is, when we're trying to go final, is that's changing.
Yeah, I could see your point of view, with that, but.
I think the city council, when they reviewed the preliminary plat, had the right idea. Dedicate this tract to the city. That way you have no obligation to maintain that. And then as the city, and Lee's right. I mean, a lot of people in this community use that area right now. Why not go ahead and put it under public ownership?
I was on city council when we reviewed that. And my thought process at the time was that it be left as open space. Or dedicate it to the city, just give it, just deed it to the city and let them maintain it. It wasn't a matter of they continued to own it and the city maintain it. It was deed it to the city and let the city maintain it. But as I said, I was not aware of the recommendation from USDA not to use that for access to the national forest. And I'm not sure, I think we've kind of walked through where that rationale came from, but this is a change to the preliminary plat as we've already agreed. But we don't own that land right now, so does that mean that we have to go back and modify the preliminary plat, or can it be approved as presented tonight as the final plat and turning that tract into residential lot? I agree with Lee that it is a major change to the preliminary plat.
Any questions for the applicant? Before we go to public hearing?
Can I say?
Please.
So, I mean, per code and spec, I feel like we met all that. Yes, let's say, based off how the code is being interpreted, it went from being named to track A to track B. I guess that's a change, but ultimately per code, we do have the option to zone that for a single family, and we do have the option to either pay the park fees or donate it. So I just wanted to state that.
Well, thank you. We need another opportunity here to create some public comment. Anybody else in the audience? I think that's you. Please come forward.
Yes, most of my points were made already, but you mind a second? Okay, so oops. My name is Danuta Brown. I live at 1111 Kings Crown Road. I'm part of Paradise Estates filing 1, just one of the original ones. I had the pleasure of meeting Will Brown, the original developer of our whole Paradise Estates development. And I'm here to urge you not to approve the final plat at this current point because it's substantially different from both the original character of the development that Will Brown envisioned for Paradise Estates and from obviously the preliminary plat that was submitted in 2019. If you look at the map, the first map that I gave you, it's sort of regurgitation of what you already know. Our developer referred that Chimney Park was dedicated in lieu of park land that's supposed to be given to the city. And also there were Paradise Greenway given. If you notice, Paradise Greenways runs along the Paradise Valley Drive and then crosses Ponderosa Drive and goes in between two houses and ends up in this funny square in the middle of nothing because that area is unplugged. On the other hand, the Paradise open space on the right-hand side, that's the space that was already part of the platted development and was given to the city. The whole idea all along was that as the additional platting happens in subdivisions, there is going to be additional open space, whether maintained by HOA or whether given to the city, that would be able to connect to, even in a sort of a circular manner, to the whatever it's called, Paradise Greenway that runs along Paradise Valley Drive. Now that was the vision. Also the vision that was sold to the city when the original development happened. I do not know what was presented in 2019 on the plan. I know that Will Brown had problems. He was sick, then he recovered. He made another submission in 2019. He lost control over some of the Paradise Estate development and they went into individual parties. And I guess this is how this party got to develop the final plan. But it seems to me the original city developed a vision for the whole area and then parceled it out and approved each individual plat as a standalone entity, which doesn't make any sense because we've heard that that open space is going to be dedicated to the city or or open space left for the use of the participants of people who live in the area. Now it's gone. And the planning department considers it no substantial change, which I find completely unreasonable. Furthermore, if you look at the second map that I submitted, it's part of your own comprehensive plan that you just published in 2021. And please note that on your comprehensive plan, on the 2030 land use map, you show connectivity from the Paradise open space all the way to National Forest on both from the Ponderosa Drive when there's this Paradise Greenway connecting to National Forest and from the Paradise open space. Now, this is never going to happen. So unless you have a better vision how to accomplish it, there's just no way that even your own vision can be realized. So there were some expectations when the subdivision was originally proposed that was sold to the city and to the planning commission to even lead you to the fact that you approve this map. I took it from the website. So it surprises me now that we are just willing to rubber stamp the final plat, which pretty much precludes us from ever having access to national forest in the city. Now, another point I would like to make is that in your comprehensive plan, you notice that one of the primary concerns that citizens expressed was access to trails, access to national forests, connectivity between the parks and open spaces. So it is a walkable city and that we can actually access nature and we can access beauty around us. Note that national forest that abuts pretty much most of the city of Woodland Park on east side that runs from slightly north of Kings Crown Road all the way to Roy Road, right before, right sort of, across from the access to a lot of Gulch. That whole area has no access from our city. It has access from Rambler Range Road, from the residences that live there in El Paso County. But most of the forest is on our property, part of our, it's abutting our city, and we don't have one single access to it. So if you allow this development to proceed without securing some kind of easement, we will never be able to access that kind of land. And that's a real loss. So I'm challenging you, think about how we can make it accomplish it, because you obviously have a vision through your comprehensive plan, and there's going to be some connectivity with trails and connectivity with national forests. But it looks to me that once that lot is solved and developed with residential property, that is gone.
Thank you. David, do we have nobody else in the audience here, but do we have some people online? Kristen, are you there?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, well, my name is Chris Gonzalez. I live at 950 Sun Valley Drive, Woodland Park, Colorado, 80863. So first of all, thank you for the opportunity to be part of this meeting, even remotely, as I'm out of state right now. Now, a quick note of clarity, I am on the board of advisors for the Woodland Park Parks and Recreation Department, but I'm not speaking on their behalf today. Or representing the views of the board or the department itself. Instead, I'm speaking as one of the founders of the Teller Trail team, which you all got a note from. You should have those in front of you. And as a neighbor, I live in Paradise Estates subdivision. So as you consider the final plat, I urge you to take a broader look at the opportunities, as have actually already been mentioned, available to not only meet the needs and desires of the developers, but also the strong desires of the broader community as a whole. Through numerous polls and public meetings conducted by the City of Woodland Park, Parks and Recreation Department, Outdoor Pikes Peak Initiative, which is a statewide initiative going on right now, the community of Woodland Park has consistently been very outspoken about their desires for better trail connectivity and more access to national forests for recreational purposes. And I'll touch on some of the things that were brought up in the discussion surrounding national forest access in a moment. So this area, as we've seen, has enormous potential to allow continuous connections between national forests, to the north and the southeast, as well as existing Woodland Park open space property to the south and city property to the west. And side note, the question was asked earlier, what is directly to the east of the city property? That's to the south of this development. And there's a sliver of private property directly to the east, and then below that is more national forest. It gets a little confusing because that is also the boundary line between Teller and El Paso County. So some of the maps, like the Teller County parcel map, get a little bit confusing there. But that is my answer to that question there. So moving forward, I'm concerned that if this development is not planned strategically, these connection opportunities will be lost forever. And realistically, we all know trying to get 25 individual landowners to enter an easement agreement for a trail is certainly not something the city is going to want to undertake. So while the developers have said they will pay park fees to further develop existing open spaces and amenities in the area, my understanding of the Parks Department polling data, which had well over 700 participants, said that they would rather those areas stay natural and not be further developed. And again, they just want more trails and trail connections. And this, of course, can be fleshed out more if ideally this does come before the Parks and Recreation Board. So all of this being said, I believe that with a little bit more time and active collaboration between the developer, the city, and local nonprofits, if desired, the addition of connecting trails and open spaces can be a major value add for the developer, our future neighbors, and the community as a whole. So as we look to the future of our community, continued growth means there needs to be more trails to avoid overuse, overcrowding, and excessive environmental damage of our current trails. And this, in my opinion, is a prime area to do just that. So I request that this plat continue to be revised in order to meet all of the needs discussed so that we don't miss a pivotal opportunity in our backyard in favor of a hasty change. So to briefly speak to the U.S. Forest Service perspective, I, of course, cannot speak on their behalf, but I do want to let y'all know that 2019, of course, is a long time ago for them to make a statement that they don't want access to that area. In the past year, and even within the past months, our local Forest Service has hired 2 and maybe even 3 additional staff members to help manage this area, including a recreational coordinator specifically for Woodland Park. And he's brand new within the past couple of months. And so again, I certainly can't tell you what their current opinions are, but that does show, in my opinion, growth in the national forest, in their ability to manage this forest, and to an interest in making more recreation available. So all that being said, thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you, sir. David, anybody else online?
No one else has their hands up.
So we're in our public hearing session. Is anybody else online wanting to speak? Opportunity to do so now?
I believe Chris wants to speak again.
Oh, all right, briefly.
Not intentionally. I did not realize I had to click the lower my hand button. So we can all go.
Okay. Thank you. Last chance then. Nobody else? Nobody else in the audience? We'll close the public hearing and give the applicant opportunity to respond if he cares to.
I appreciate everyone's concerns and opinions. I just wanted to note that per our approval, on April 4th, 2019, we have an approval letter stated April 24th, 2009, and it does state that tract B is reserved for private open space, and that would be owned and maintained by the homeowner association unless the developer decides to dedicate it as open space to the city. So I just wanted to state that. I'm sure you guys have access to all that, but that's all I have.
Thank you for clarifying. No. Any questions for staff or discussion?
I could comment. I would be more inclined to move forward with a final plat that showed some open space in tract B/lot 25 area that would provide for connectivity for the future. Whether it was the entire 12 acres or a portion thereof, either one would be more amenable. I don't think doing away with that option stays with the original preliminary plat intent. And I do think that there's some evidence that it was planned as sort of a master plan. So that would be more. I would be more inclined to support that kind of a final plat than what I'm seeing here tonight.
I would make the comment that the master plan is not directive, but nonetheless, it was a discussion that occurred about connectivity to the national forest. But I would be more inclined to ask that the final plat look like the preliminary plat in respect to tract B. I wouldn't put any modifiers on it. I think that the application for the preliminary and plat in 2019 was generous. It offered a tract that would have been maintained by the HOA or the ability to turn it over to the city. And I would just leave the or use that same wording for the final plat.
One further, a good point was made referring to the comprehensive plan, which anticipated the connectivity between, in fact, in two places across there. One thing which I had among records from this previously was the master plan for the area that the previous owners had put together. The master plan shows that same connectivity, open space on either side of it. So it wasn't, it wasn't just a comprehensive plan came up with some idea that, that the developer has to live with without participating in. The master plan itself shows open space from the Paradise Greenway to the National Forest and in what would be tract B. Someone to take a look at the map too. So the master plan, I'm not sure when it originally started. Was it back in 2005? It's been renewed multiple times. But so that
there's a plan in here called Master Plan for Slope Analysis Top of Paradise, and it was 1999 that showed that same kind of open space to the National Forest.
When you say master plan, are you talking about the master plan for the Paradise Estates?
Exactly, the Paradise Estates master plan.
Thunderbird Estates / Paradise Estates.
If it's in 99, that's for more than 2 decades. It had been planned that this would be connected through open space. And it was reflected in our comprehensive plan, and it was reflected in the preliminary plat. So I can't support a final plat that doesn't continue that.
In addition to that comment, Lee, I agree with you. And it's very typical for us to receive a comment from the Parks Advisory Board too. And you mentioned that. We don't have that in front of us today. And I think that would be very, very important to have. But all in all being said, the intent of the Paradise Estates master plan for connection, our comprehensive plan that we reviewed just recently shows that as being a connection. And again, most of this particular lot, I've hiked this area. I parked in the city parking lot and walked up, and I just assumed it was public land because of that parking lot. I didn't know.
But it's just the area right by the road there.
Yeah, and I didn't know that. There's no way you could tell that. So I think all along, and certainly the city council had a right initially in the ways they said, consider dedicating this.
I have a suggestion to allow some time to address this, and maybe for the developer to talk with some people at the city about some of the options too is. Since it appears from the ordinance that this was supposed to go to Parks and Recreation Advisory Board. I would be interested in tabling the matter until the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board could look at it and make a recommendation, seeing the new final plat in front of them.
Do you want to table it or continue?
Maybe it's continues technically, I guess the term.
I'm not sure. I think table kills it. Continue allows us to bring it back at a later date.
But certainly, certainly it's possible to, approve it with with a recommendation of change or reject it. Or actually, I guess, I would reject it with an explanation of the reason why. But I'm not sure that's the best interest of the developer either, to try and give him an opportunity to work something out with the city to provide the kind of access that is important. As opposed, as they say, to make it, to deny is, that may not be the way the developer wishes to go.
Okay, so I will kind of summarize some options here. Given the length of time to route something to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, and us not doing that before this came to you is definitely an oversight on our part. I apologize profusely that occurred. So when to have that out there as it would be continuance of the hearing, it's a really long time to have a quasi judicial item in an open hearing, basically. So, and with this being a fairly passionate topic around trails, there's a huge concern on staff's part about those grocery store conversations that people are going to want to have with you instead of, here in our hearing room. So that would be my caution around doing a continuance. And it could be done, and we would need to a date and time certain. In terms of when the Planning Commission would pick that back up. So we would need to figure out when the next Parks and Recreation Advisory Board meeting is and make sure your meeting's after that. So one option is to continue to a time and date certain. Another one would be to, and bear with me till you hear the whole thing. Well, another one is to just reject based what's proposed tonight, say no. And then the third option I'm going to lay out is to potentially recommend approval, provided lot 25 is relabeled back to 25 tract B with all of the terms and conditions associated with the preliminary plat for the HOA ownership or dedication to the city. Whatever all that language was. So those are my three suggested.
I was wondering, is there another one as a possibility? What are the implications if the applicant wished to withdraw it to avoid any negative finding and then restart it?
He absolutely can do that. And he could say that now, or he could wait for whatever recommendation you have this evening and then potentially reassess. I've had that happen with something else where it's like, nope, we're not going forward at this point in time. We want to reevaluate and potentially resubmit.
So it sounds like the main concern is the trails, right? Trails number one. If the plot would have said track B, we probably would have still talked about the trails. My guess is the public would want it donated, right? But as long as I see option 3 to recommend approval. And it going back to what it was originally with it being labeled as track B. In my opinion, I think that's fair. That's what's per code, that's what's per law. We did our due diligence to find out what the people wanted. Everyone has an opinion, right? Everyone wants the same thing. And I understand that everyone wants to hear that, hey, people are still gonna have access. If we revert it back to track B, then we still have the question of, do we have access? But at that point, we did everything that's in the plat, we did everything that's black and white. If it said track B, we wouldn't have to go back to the Parks Advisory Board, in my opinion. Again, it's up to your council, but it's my opinion that And that what is fair is would be option 3 of what Karen recommended. Because the only thing that is different on that piece of paper is the text for lot 25 versus tract B.
If the applicant can the applicant during the middle of the process change it? Can the applicant revise himself the plat to restore it to something else?
I've seen situations where based on, comment within a public hearing, the applicant agrees to make changes. So my assessment is yes. He
It's an
can,
approval with conditions, correct?
yeah.
We would approve it with the condition that the lot 25 revert back to tract B with all the same references from the preliminary plat
That
on
was
his
my,
final plat.
that was my suggestion.
And
Not
I guess
recommendation,
I
just
would
a
take
suggestion.
that one step further and take the city council's recommendation and say that track B would be dedicated to the city.
Oh, that's,
Do you want the same notes that's in the preliminary plat that's already approved by the city council, which that it may be, or that they'd like him to consider it?
Well, that has been considered and that.
and that's what,
we-
but that's what the preliminary plat wording said, is that it
They would
could
be
be,
considered.
it would be considered. What I'm hearing is the most straightforward action tonight would be the condition that the wording relevant to tract B revert to the preliminary
plat wording.
plat condition.
As it was approved.
Right.
As it was approved.
I mean, it's
That
still
makes sense.
problematic to me, and it's privately owned property. And unless it's dedicated to the city, I still see it as an access issue and a trespassing issue, but
Well, that's why I recommended dedicated to the public.
But-
Or it wouldn't be a trespassing issue.
that would be entirely different than from the preliminary plat wording. We would be more directive in nature than suggesting that they consider it. I mean, we could do that, I'm sure.
We're making recommendations to council.
Mhm.
They make the final decision. So I guess we could recommend that property be dedicated to the city or conveyed in whatever method.
If it's not available for sale, if it's the alternative being held by an HOA as open space is something that costs the developer and the residents money over time. Whereas giving it to the city presumably is going to save them some fees that otherwise being paid, adding up to I mean, that's what everyone's expected all along would be worked out here.
I mean, if ultimately everything's being deferred to the plan, I'm sorry that I don't know the whole story, I'll do a better job to understand it, but I feel like everything has been met. I've looked back at the history, but the main topic with master plan, everything connecting. If it says track B, everything's connecting. Over the past 20 years, and I could be wrong, but I remember seeing a no trespassing sign there like a year or two ago. Over the past 20 years, people have still been using it, even when Will Brown owned it, right? Versus myself and JJ. What is the difference? If we do want to go down that path, then I would like to get the option again, we would like to have the discussions and have the options to be incentivized more versus just like small permit fees, right? Like the huge fee, the biggest fees are the tap fees, right? Water and sewer.
The city can't do that.
But for example, there's engineering specs that are not 100% accurate, right? We're deferring back to CSU specs, but to please the city, we're doing what is asked, right? Even though there might not be clear, concise specifications. Myself as a civil engineer, I can see why they're specifying these things. They might not be 100% there, but I'm doing it just because I know I'm going to get a better product. So what I'm saying is, are we able to have those conversations to where we could get deductions on permit fees or things like.
Unfortunately, our charter prohibits that expressly, but in terms of what can be done in dedication of open space versus paying the parks and recreation fee, that can be explored.
Because it's a third of the land, you know, and it's a beautiful section land.
But it's unbuildable. Yeah, it's also
not buildable,
unbuildable.
but it would be to create like the build a legacy, build a legacy, a legacy here and hold it within our own group.
And if we revert to the language of the original plat or of the preliminary plat, you still have that option. What I think we've all agreed is that the wording for this final plat is in contradiction to that preliminary plat substantially.
Yes.
Agreed, but if I revert back to, again, I would have to talk it over with my team, but I don't want to delay the plat any longer. If it was reverted back to its same track B, then there shouldn't be anything holding it up, in my opinion. Because per that letter of approval, it says it's up to our discretion. At the end of the letter, it says that I don't have it in front of me, but it says something along the lines that you advise or you strongly recommend to consider donating it to the city.
Right.
But it's up to us.
I'd actually put that as a form of an additional condition of approval.
I slightly disagree with you. I'm comfortable agreeing to put it back to exactly the way the preliminary plat was approved by the city council.
I was
Without
into that.
Okay. Yeah,
And then the owner of track B can come back to the city and say, we have no interest in paying taxes on this. Would you like to have us dedicated to the city? That could be hashed out at a later time. I guess I would make the motion to approve the Haven at Paradise final plat subject to the conditions found in the staff report 1 through 4, and add condition 5 that lot 25 be reverted back to track B with the original notes and comments on the approval of the preliminary plat.
I'll second that.
Any comments, discussion?
Yeah. What is the advantage for the city of doing that compared to us making a recommendation that preliminary plat be disapproved? And in accordance with a requirement that we explain why.
it allows them to accept the conditions and move forward from this meeting without having to come back to another
They
meeting.
can do that either way. From nothing happens whether we reject or we accept conditionally or whatever we do, it's still going to move along in the same schedule to the
It'd
city
have to come
council.
back to us for public hearing if we reject it, right? No,
No, it goes to the city. And I think,
Councilman's final call.
I think it's a stronger statement to say, we reject it, explain why. We reject it because it is removed, converted to track B to an individual parcel available for development and sale.
I'm happy with the motion and the second, and I would vote on that, and I don't see a need to do that per se. It's fine if you want to, but
Lee, I think if we reject the plat, that would put the owner and the developer behind schedule, and they're anticipating being able to develop this property and go ahead and plat the lots where they could sell those. So I would suggest that if they want to, in a later time, ask the city to take it over. That's fine. So I'd ask the commission to support the motion and second.
Other thoughts?
I support the motion.
Okay, can we restate it so I'm clear?
Call the question.
No, just what is the?
Staff
Motion was to approve.
Staff understands the motion by Mr. Larson was to approve the subdivision final plat with staff conditions 1 through 4 and add a condition number 5 that lot 25 revert to the original label of tract B with all of the plat notes from the preliminary plat also going
Related to
forward with
Plat
the
B.
final plat. There's a recording of that, but that's staff's summary of understanding the motion, and it was seconded by Sean Nielsen.
We can take a vote now.
Commissioner Kennedy,
Yes.
Commissioner Larson,
Yes.
Commissioner Nielsen,
Yes.
Chairman Hartsfield,
Yes.
Vice Chair Brown,
Yes.
and Commissioner Harvey.
Yes.
Very good. That's all of our public hearings for this evening. Takes us to reports. Karen, staff have any reports to present?
What do I want? Just a reminder that at our next meeting, it will be a work session and our consultant Jen with Logan Simpson will be here on site. And I will be zooming in from Zoom land. So my apologies that I am remote that night. But hopefully we can make good progress again as we continue working through the definitions. And then kind of a side note that we've been working on this past year is our permit tracking system that we use is basically an access database, which leaves a lot to be desired. In fact, the team has forbid me or CJ, I think even the new people were not allowed to touch it because they're very concerned about us accidentally clicking something we shouldn't. And it's getting really batty and crazy. So this past year, we have been window shopping a variety of permit tracking software programs and gone through number of demos, and we've narrowed it down to 2 different options. And so we're on the home stretch of pulling the trigger on updating our tracking software. And of course, that's a whole other big project once we start into that in terms of migrating data and fields and, you know, our outward facing portal to the general public that can apply electronically, as well as better able to see where their application is in a process and better access for the folks in the field to take photos and upload those when they do inspections, you know, around like our infrastructure. Or code compliance. So it'll be a nice step forward, but there's a lot of work that needs to happen. So that's one of those things that's been kind of going on in the background. So just thought I'd share that with y'all.
And after our work session last time, I kind of mentioned to you that during a work session, that it was my opinion that the planning commission doesn't actually make any final decisions on any of these provisions. And then we will all have the opportunity to revisit all those things. And as far as, you know, sharing what everybody else thinks, I think that's healthy for us to understand those provisions. And at the same time, I don't want to slow down that process, but I think it's very important that we see all that. Last work session, we had stuff on the screen that I could not read. I mean, it was just too small.
Yeah, I have challenged as well trying to read, particularly if you try to put 2 things on the screen at once, that was.
Yeah.
So let me ask this evening, Lee, are you better able to see when you have your laptop in front of you?
Sure.
Yeah. So there is that ability to bring your laptop and have it, you know, directly in front of you.
I zoomed in last time. I zoomed in last time so I could see it on my screen. What was up there? It was easier to read.
Zoom to meeting you're sitting in.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
So I can
seriously.
have it on my own screen.
Seriously, yeah, no, since it's all electronic, you can, yeah, have it in front of you. And with that share screen, it's not just up there, it's in front of you. So basically right now on my screen, I'm looking at that same thing that's on that monitor above us. So that may be worth trying.
Well, I don't want to keep us here any longer, but what is the status of the short-term rental petition and revisit?
They got through validating all the signatures, determined that there was adequate signatures, and there was the protest period. there was a protest. I forget if it was last Friday. I think it was last Friday. They actually had a hearing related to the protests. And last I knew, they're waiting the hearing officer's determination.
Okay.
So, and as far as,
I read it in the paper was something about people felt they'd been misled with the petition. So it was an individual who said he wished he hadn't signed it.
yeah, that captures it pretty accurately. Thank you. As far as I know, I believe this is still going to be a topic for city council on their February 16th meeting next week.
Okay.
But what aspect and some of those other nuances, this is hardcore city clerk things. So I'm just kind of on the periphery.
Sure. So legacy STR licenses remain in effect until this is all settled.
Correct. There is the possibility that the city council may decide to send things back to us here at Planning Commission. And I have been consistently pushing back from the standpoint of we want clear policy direction from city council as to what it is that they would like to see in the ordinance. Since this last time, there was a little confusion after things came out of Planning Commission and went to city council. That they decided to have a subsequent policy conversation at that point. So that we're not spinning our wheels. I'm looking to I'm trying to get us good direction for you all to look at and weigh and consider with anything that you potentially need to revisit or are asked to revisit.
Thank you. CJ, thank you for your work. Great cases.
Like I said, he wanted to present all three tonight, so who am I to get in the way?
Any word on Woodland Station?
No, it's still kind of out there. Sorry.
We should adjourn.
Yeah.
We're getting there. Any other comments for the general good? 10:09, meeting's adjourned.
Thank you all very much.
I'm glad you're finding something new beside access.